Zion, even when you're temporarily blind, you sure still know how to piss monsters off, Adira said with a bitter smile on her face as the rank 5 overlord increased its speed out of annoyance after the boy's arrow once again bounced off its nose. Pissing people and monsters off is one of my strong points, Lady Adira, 13 replied. So if you don't want to get pissed off, you better stay away from me. Het's such a cheeky brat. Adira was smiling, but deep inside, she was feeling terrified. Originally, she thought that she would be able to fight the rank 5 overlord on her own, but she underestimated just how numerous and powerful its subordinates were. This was why she was praying to the deity of silence, Duma, to make sure that the black hound that they were riding on wouldn't trip, or else, it would be all over for them. Suddenly, a hooting sound reverberated in the surroundings, making 13's body stiffen. Visago had informed him that the purple-furred honey badger was less than a mile away from them, and if they continued to travel on their path, they would meet up with that monster in less than a minute. Lady Adira, can you see ahead of us? 13 asked. Yes, why? Adira replied. Do you see any monster in front of us? No. I only see a few small hills. 13 remained silent for a few seconds before making a hooting sound of his own. Visago hooted back, as it acknowledged his master's order. Were you perhaps a Poco in your past life? Adira asked in a teasing tone. Why can you mimic animal sounds? Well, I used to have a close relationship with a phoenix in my past life, 13 replied. She taught me how to talk to birds. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say, Zion. Adira only meant her question as a joke, but she didn't expect that Zion would be quick on the uptake and answered her joke with another joke. However, little did she know that Zion wasn't joking at all. Another hoot reverberated in the surroundings, which made 13 understand that he would have to take a gamble in order to survive. Blackie, if you hear a loud screech, run as fast as you can without holding back, 13 ordered. It doesn't matter if you get exhausted. Just do as I say if you want to live. The black hound was fed up with the boy calling it Blackie, so it planned to disobey the boy's order. But when it heard a loud screech that came from Visago, the black hound's body subconsciously shuddered as it ran past one of the hills in front of it. Time seemed to move in super slow motion as the black hound and the drow looked to their left side and saw a 2-meter-tall honey badger hiding behind the hill, with its purple glowing eyes looking in their direction. Only a few seconds had passed, but for Adira and Blackie, they felt as if they were staring at the face of death, who could reap their lives in the fraction of a second. 13, who was riding behind Adira, smiled faintly because he had felt the drow's body stiffen after hearing the loud screech. Unlike the two who seemed to have been stuck in time, the 7-year-old didn't feel a single thing. After what felt like an eternity, time moved normally, which prompted the black hound to follow 13's earlier order. It ran like a mad lad, no longer caring about the aftermath that would follow after running at its full speed. The purple-furred honey badger had completely erased its presence, making it so no one was able to detect that it was hiding behind the hill. It didn't move and allowed the panicked black hound to run past it, but its gaze lingered on the boy, who had momentarily opened his eyes to look in its direction. Zion's gaze was still blurry, but he saw 2 purple glowing orbs in his line of sight. He knew that these were the purple-furred honey badger's eyes, which made him raise his hand to salute the monster and say a few words in its direction. He's all yours. A few seconds later, the purple honey badger leaped forward, just in time to clash against the rank 5 overlord's body, who had no idea that its mortal enemy was lying in wait to ambush it. Since the golden-eyed hyena's attention was locked on the annoying boy, it didn't notice his enemy, who had already entered its detection range. The purple-furred honey badger had noticed that its target was running in its direction for some reason, so it decided to hide and ambush it when the hyena came within striking range. Now that it understood that the rank 5 overlord was pursuing that Warzer black hound that passed a few seconds ago, it decided to strike while its opponent was still reeling from its surprise attack. Using its strong jaw to bite the hyena's foot, it succeeded in making the hyena lose its balance, causing it to fall to the ground beside it. The two rolled while biting each other, sending rocks and dirt flying in every direction. The other golden-eyed hyenas didn't know whether they should help their leader or not. All of them knew that if they joined the action, There was a chance that their bodies would be crushed by the two monsters, who were fighting like two tavern brawlers on the ground. Knowing that it was impossible for it to win alone, the rank 5 overlord howled, ordering its subordinates to attack. This prompted the hyenas to no longer hesitate and attack at full force, biting the honey badger, whose biting strength was high enough to crush their bones. Adira turned around to look at the chaotic battle and secretly thanked the deities that they were able to escape in one piece. The Black Hound didn't have the leisure to see who would win against the two monsters and simply did its best to run like its life depended on it. 13, on the other hand, remained still while making hooting sounds. He ordered Visego to keep watch on the battle and tell him who emerged victorious among the two overlords. Meanwhile, they needed to find a safe place to hide so that Blackie could rest. Blackie, you can stop running at full speed now, 13 ordered. If you know any safe places to hide, let's go there first. Blackie barked weakly before changing their course. It knew a few hiding places in the Furvis grasslands, where the Warzer black hounds often used to conceal themselves from their predators, which had long run away in fear of being eaten by the two overlords, who were currently engaged in a death match with each other. Did you know? Adira asked in a solemn tone. Did you know that monster was lying in wait in front of us? The black hound also looked at the 7-year-old, who was currently leaning on the wall of the cave with his eyes still closed. I did, 13 replied. And yet you didn't tell us? Adira's voice became cold as her eyes bored into the boy, who had dared to attempt such a gamble, betting his and her lives on the line. If I told you, what would you have done? 13 asked back in a calm tone. I would have definitely not followed you in this suicide mission. That's the thing, Lady Adira. I didn't ask you to follow me. I was prepared to do this mission alone. The corner of the drow's eyes twitched because she couldn't refute Zion's words. She was the one who had decided to follow the boy, so she couldn't blame him for the turn of events that transpired an hour ago. The black hound, who was too exhausted to do anything, only glared at the boy, who seemed to be the most calm among the three of them. It was as if the boy didn't think that getting sandwiched between two overlords, who were having a territorial battle, was a big deal. Suddenly, the sound of wings flapping reached Adira's ears. However, she didn't move because there was only one bird who would come to their location. Just as she expected, Visego entered the cave and landed beside the 7-year-old, who had also sensed his presence. The Pokopokos started to make chirping sounds, which annoyed Adira very much. Clearly, the two didn't plan to let her and the black hound understand their discussion. When the Pokopoko and the boy finally stopped chirping at each other, the drow wasn't able to sit still and asked what they were talking about. What happened? Adira asked. Tell me everything. Instead of answering, Zion raised his hand as if telling the drow to give him a few moments to organize his thoughts. What Visego had shared with him was something he had already considered happening, so he wasn't too surprised when it came to pass. When we left the battlefield, the two overlords fought against each other, with the hyena suffering a serious injury, 13 explained. However, before the purple-furred honey badger could deliver the killing blow, the rank 2 hyenas performed wave tactics, sacrificing themselves to give their leader time to recover. The leader of the golden-eyed hyena has strong regenerative abilities, but it will not be able to heal its injury in a short period of time. Because of this, it used its dominion over its rank 4 subordinates to make them jump into its jaws, so that it could cannibalize them. The drow and the Warzer black hound were both surprised by this development. Cannibalism was taboo to most creatures in the world, but there were certain monsters who did it as a last resort. Adira could tell what the rank 5 overlord wanted to achieve when it decided to eat its high-ranking subordinates, but he still asked Zion this question. Did it make a breakthrough? Adira asked. It did, 13 replied. Not only did it evolve, it has also undergone a mutation. It is no longer a golden-eyed hyena, but a diabolical crimson-eyed hyena. What kind of monster is that? Adira asked. And how do you know such a thing? 13 shrugged. Visego told me. The Pokopoko, who had just been used as a scapegoat, tilted its head to the side because he didn't tell 13 anything. He didn't even know the name of the monster that the hyena had evolved into. Visego only told his master what the new rank 6 overlord looked like, which made the Pokopoko wonder how 13 knew what it was. The diabolical crimson-eyed hyena is a black hyena with 2 demonic horns on its head, 13 explained. It is a mutant variant among golden-eyed hyenas, and one of the triggers for such an evolution is through cannibalism. However, this is not an ordinary monster. It is an overlord, so its power and ferocity is stronger than that of a normal monster. According to Visago, the clash between it and the purple-furred honey badger ended with the badger fleeing after getting seriously injured. If not for the fact that it has just evolved, it might have pursued the fleeing honey badger and dealt it the killing blow. I'm afraid that if it manages to consume its rival's body and core, there's a possibility that it might even become a pseudo-rank 7 overlord, which would be a very terrifying monster. Adira and the Warzer Black Hound looked at the 7-year-old in silence. They still couldn't believe that such an event had happened just an hour after they left the scene. But there is one piece of good news, 13 said. Actually, there's 2. The first one is that after its evolution, the diabolical hyena will enter a lethargic phase for a few days to allow its body to adapt to its new form. Since the purple-furred honey badger is also seriously injured and fled to the northeast of the Warzer Plains, we don't need to worry about escaping this place alive. The Drow and Black Hound found this news to be exceptionally good because, as long as those 2 monsters were out of the picture, there were extremely few creatures that could threaten them as they reunited with their group. And the second piece of good news? Adira asked. There is one seriously injured obsidian tiger beetle that is not far from here, 13 answered. Lady Adira, can you please follow Visago and help capture it? The corner of Adira's lips twitched before giving the 7-year-old a good smack on the head, making the boy cry out in pain. You bastard! Why are you treating me like some kind of hired thug? Adira finally snapped after bottling up all the frustrations that she had suffered after joining Zion in his suicide mission. Do you really think that I'm one of your subordinates that you can order around, huh? 13 rubbed his head in order to ease the pain of getting smacked by the drow, who made sure to restrain her strength so that she didn't accidentally kill him. I just think that this is a golden opportunity, 13 said in a voice filled with injustice. Since we have already suffered so much, we should not leave this place empty-handed, right? Adira snorted, but she also thought that the boy's words were reasonable. 13 came to the Furvis grasslands in order to capture 3 creatures. The Warzer Black Hound, the Obsidian Tiger Beetle, and the Red-Eyed Salamander, who were all rank 3 monsters. After the things that happened on this trip, the boy decided that he had no choice but to abandon his mission to ensure their safety. However, since one of the monsters on his list was readily available, he thought that it would not be a bad idea to capture it now, while they still could. As for the red-eyed salamander, the boy decided that it was not worth it to continue risking their lives to find the fire-breathing monster. Although it would have been an important asset for their forging needs, their lives were more valuable in his opinion. Fine, Adira clicked her tongue after much deliberation. Blackie, come with me. The Black Hound glared at the drow as if telling her, Girl, stop calling me Blackie. But, since Adira was stronger than it, the Black Hound decided to just obey and get it over with, leaving Tiona and Visago to look after their master, who still hadn't recovered his vision. They're finally gone, Visago, 13 said as he lightly patted the Pocopoco's head. Thanks for the hard work. The Pocopoco hummed, not shying away from the boy's touch and praise. But, Zion, when will you recover your vision? If I rest properly, it will return in 3 to 4 days, 13 replied. At least, that is my estimate. I pushed myself a bit too much during the battle. I see. Visago nodded. There is something else that I forgot to tell you earlier. Your hunch was right. They have managed to slip through the cracks. The boy frowned after hearing Visago's report. How many? 13 inquired. And how close are they to our location? 4, and they are at least 5 miles away, Visago replied. But since tigerkins have superhuman senses and instincts, I'm sure they already sensed that something might be happening here in the Furvis grasslands. There's a high possibility that they will investigate. 13 sighed. Things are never easy. They certainly aren't, Vasco commented. Visago, let's form contingency plans, 13 stated. I don't want to leave any stones left unturned. The 7-year-old and the Poco discussed many things, while Tiona rested her head on his shoulder and listened silently. Snakes didn't have ears and usually used their fork-shaped tongues to feel the vibrations in their surroundings. But the Domini Mortis was different. It was one of the handful of snakes in Solterra that possessed the natural blessings to hear and understand things perfectly. Since its potential to rank up was stripped away, the Domini Mortis was compensated with a few abilities to make up for it. It had other unique abilities. It could make its body as hard as steel, had a high level of stealth, could swim, and could dig underground. They also had high resistance to heat and cold. Domini Mortis could even swim on lava, unaffected by the heat. Of course, getting hit by a fireball spell was a different matter. Magic wasn't made from natural heat or flames, so if they weren't careful, they could get seriously injured or worse, killed by it. Truth be told, the Domini Mortis were a blessed race. Unfortunately, they were simply too powerful. It was for this reason that they were not allowed to rank up. Their strength would break the balance of the world. In a way, Tiona was similar to 13. Fated to stay as a rank 1 monster from birth till death because otherwise, if no shackles were placed on them, they would simply be unstoppable. An hour later, Adira returned to the cave with Blackie, who was busy pulling the steel cage behind him. The black hound barked several times at the boy, complaining that he wasn't a horse to be used as a mount or to transport cargo. 13 pacified it, saying he would make up for it once they returned to Groner City, which made the black hound temporarily forgive him. Lady Adira, there is something that you need to know, 13 said after he finished dealing with the black hound, who decided to go back to sleep. There are Tigerkin scouts a few miles away from our location. It is best that we leave after Blackie has rested for a few hours. The drow clicked her tongue before sitting cross-legged on the ground. I think I understand what it feels to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Next time, I won't be accompanying you on your wholesome adventures, Zion. The drow's words reeked of sarcasm, but 13 didn't mind it. He understood that his companion was just venting out her frustration after her near-death experience with her narrow escape from the 2 overlords of the Warzer Plains. Several hours later, a reluctant Blackie was once again used as a horse by 13 and Adira. Not to mention, it was now forced to pull a steel cage behind it as well. Fortunately, the 2 overlords were both out of the picture, so they safely made their way out of the Furvis grasslands at a steady pace. It took them a day to return to the brighter area of the Warzer Plains, making the drow finally breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't think I'd be happy to see the light of the sun again, Adira commented. Especially since I'm a drow who is used to living underground. Blackie, on the other hand, barked in annoyance. It had been too used to the darkness of the Furvis grasslands that being in a very bright place makes it uneasy. Don't worry, Blackie, 13 stated. When we get home, I'll set you and your comrades free. You can return to the Furvis grasslands and hide from that rank 6 overlord, who will be waking up in a week or two. The Warzer Black Hound whimpered because it had completely forgotten about the mutated diabolical hyena, who would make the Furvis grasslands its new territory. Of course, if you don't want to become its food, you can stay with me for a while. 13 started to use his years of becoming the host of a salesman to throw some bait down in order to make the Warzer Black Hound his personal mount. If you stay with me, you don't have to worry about food and shelter. Also, you can even start a family with one of your comrades. Out of the 3, 2 of them are girls. You and the other male doggy can have 1 mate each, isn't that exciting? The Warzer Black Hound then barked angrily at 13 as if telling him to F***ck off and mind his own business. Seeing the Black Hound's reaction, Adira wasn't able to stop herself from giggling. Although she didn't understand what Blackie was trying to say, she could make guesses due to how angry it was. Suddenly, the 3 heard a loud whistle, which made 13's body tense. Lady Adira, do you remember those Tigerkin scouts I mentioned a while ago? 13 asked. Are they coming? Adira asked. No, 13 replied. They are already here. As soon as 13 said those words, an arrow flew in their direction, which prompted the drow to fire her own arrow in the span of a heartbeat. The 2 arrows collided, deflecting each other and falling harmlessly on the ground. A few seconds later, 4 saber-toothed tigers, with tigerkins mounted on their back, entered their sight. The saber-toothed tigers were rank 3 monsters, while the tigerkins themselves were rank 4 to rank 5 beastkins. They were the scouting party that the tigerkins had dispatched in the Warzer Plains. But after seeing the drow, the boy, the black hound, and the steel cage where an obsidian tiger beetle was held, they thought that Adira was just a slave trader who planned to sell the monster she caught to the barbarians. Thinking that the drow was easy prey, they didn't hesitate to attack so that they could torture her to gather information. "Zion, I think your misfortune is rubbing off on me," Adira said wryly. "Lady Adira, don't worry about me and save yourself," 13 replied. "Blackie won't be able to outrun them with the 2 of us riding on his back." "You're right," Adira said before summoning her sword to cut the rope that bound the obsidian tiger beetle to Blackie's body. "Off you go." The drow slapped the black hound's backside, prompting Blackie to run away, with 13 hanging onto it for dear life. The saber-toothed tigers then separated into 2 groups, with 3 of them pursuing 13 and Blackie and the last one charging toward Adira, who had a sneer plastered on his face. "Since you want to die, then I'll send you on your way," Adira said as she knocked an arrow to her bow and prepared to fight. Although she was worried about Zion, she knew that she didn't have the luxury of helping him at this point in time. The tigerkin that had stayed behind was as strong as her, so she didn't have the leeway to focus her attention on other things. "Just be safe, Zion," Adira thought. "I'll finish this quickly and come to find you." While Adira was having a face-off with the champion of the tigerkins and his mount, Blackie was running with 13 mounted on his back. The boy was still glued to the black hound's body due to the shadows that the drow had conjured, but the farther away they were from her, the weaker the ability became. Because of this, the boy had no choice but to hold onto the black hound for his dear life. The rank 3 saber-toothed tigers were fast, but they were not as fast as the black hound who specialized in running away. Unfortunately, the tigerkins were proficient marksmen as well. Every time they aimed their arrows at their target, Blackie was forced to run in a zigzag pattern in its attempt to dodge all incoming arrows. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to evade all the arrows, and some of them landed on the black hound's body. One arrow even landed dangerously close to 13's neck. The 7-year-old was focusing his concentration on his hearing, listening to the whistling of the wind, allowing him to predict the location where the arrows would hit. Sensing that an arrow would be hitting his location soon, the boy gritted his teeth and pushed himself off the Warzer black hound's back. He tucked his chin and knees on his chest and bent his arms to protect his head. His landing on the ground was hard, with his shoulder taking the brunt of his fall, making him wince in pain. But he did what he needed to do and rolled to mitigate the impact of the fall until it was dispersed completely. Tiona, who was coiled on the boy's neck, made sure to protect his neck from injury and coiled around it like a protective vambrace. A few seconds later, the boy stopped rolling on the ground. The first thing he heard was the sound of the saber-toothed tiger's steps, which were fast approaching him. The second thing he heard was Tiona's angry hiss as the black snake positioned herself between the tigerkins and her master. "A lord of death," one of the tigerkins exclaimed as soon as they saw the black snake, who was ready to pounce at a moment's notice. It was very obvious in their eyes that the black snake was protecting the fallen boy, who laid completely still on the ground. "Hisses." Tiona's angry hissing made the 3 tigerkins unable to decide on what to do. The Domini Mortis was a sacred beast that no beastkin dared to hurt or kill. Harming it in any way was taboo for the beastkins, for the Domini Mortis was the symbol of Elyon, the deity who represented death and destruction. Because of this, no beastkin had the guts to even scratch it, for those who did would become Elyon's enemy for life. "What do we do?" one of the tigerkins asked their second-in-command. The vice-captain was also at a loss on what to do because they didn't think that a human boy would be in the possession of a Domini Mortis. While the 3 tigerkins were debating on what to do next, 13 finally stirred and slowly propped himself up from the ground. Tiona hurriedly crawled on his body, coiling herself on his neck, and hissed softly in his ears, asking if he was all right. "I'm fine, Ona," 13 said. "I think I sprained my left shoulder though." Tiona flicked her tongue as if licking the boy's cheek, making the tigerkins look at each other with uncertainty. Even the saber-toothed tigers, who were ferocious monsters, didn't dare to growl at the black snake's direction because they shared a strong bond with the tigerkin race. Their taboos were their taboos, so they remained silent and waited for their masters to handle the current situation. "Who are you, boy?" the vice captain asked. "And why were you traveling with that drow earlier?" "She is a slave trader, and I am one of her slaves," 13 replied as he assessed the injury of his left shoulder by touching it with his right hand. "Are you a barbarian?" the vice captain asked. "Do I look like a barbarian?" 13 asked back. "I'm the one asking the questions here, boy. So, answer me." "I am not a barbarian." 13 knew that adult tigerkins, especially warrior tigerkins, have a code of honor to not hurt children, especially those who were below 10 years of age. So he was safe. At least for the time being. "You will allow us to capture you," the vice captain stated. "Worry not, because we will not harm you. Also, we will give you medicine to tend to your injuries. We just need to take you back to our camp, so we can ask you questions." "Okay," 13 replied. "Also, tell the Lord of Death to not bite us," the vice captain said. "We mean it no harm." "Understood." 13 nodded. "Tiona, don't bite any of them, okay?" The black snake reluctantly nodded its head before giving a soft hiss to let her master know that she would obey his orders. "Maya, tend to his injuries," the vice captain commanded. "We will be taking him back to our camp." "Understood," Maya replied. The lady tigerkin dismounted from her mount and anxiously approached the boy to examine his left arm. Tiona eyed the tigerkin with hostility, but she made no attempts to bite the latter. "You have sprained your shoulder," Maya said as she looked at the boy, who had his eyes closed. "But it's not that severe. It will naturally heal in 2 to 4 weeks. I have a potion here that acts as a painkiller. Do you want it?" 13 nodded. "I want it. Thank you." "Here you go," Maya said as she took out a small bottle from his pouch. 13 reached out for it. But because he had his eyes closed, he just kept his right hand raised so that the tigerkin could give it to him. "Are you blind?" Maya asked with curiosity as she placed the pain-killing potion in 13's hand, so he could grab hold of it. "Temporarily blind," 13 answered. "I strained my eyes a day ago." "Oh, you poor child." Maya felt a little sorry for the boy, who not only sprained his shoulder but had also temporarily lost his vision as well. When 13 finished drinking the painkiller potion, he felt a little better because it was very effective. The stinging pain on his shoulder was now gone, and he could think properly once more. "We will take you to our camp," Maya said before holding Zion's right hand and guiding him toward the saber-toothed tiger, who had crouched down so that the boy could properly mount its back. Maya sat behind 13, holding him securely in place. Tiona gave the tigerkin that "you better not do anything funny, or else I'll bite you" gaze, making Maya shudder. "Let's regroup with our captain first," the vice captain said. "I'm sure he's done dealing with that drow by now." The rest of the tigerkins nodded as they made their way back to the location where they first saw the boy and the drow together. High above their heads, the Sago followed closely behind. One of the contingency plans that he and his master had talked about was about what the Pokopoko would do just in case 13 ended up being captured by the tigerkins. Since the boy knew the tigerkins' code of honor, he was confident that he wouldn't be harmed even if he was captured. Because of this, Visago wasn't too worried about his master's safety. However, he still followed behind to see if Adira, who had stayed behind to keep the tigerkin champion at bay, had managed to survive her clash with him. After the group of 3, plus a 7-year-old boy and a grumpy black snake backtracked from where they separated with their captain, they saw a land littered with small craters as if several bombs exploded at the same time. At the center of it was their captain, who was kneeling on the ground, with his saber-toothed tiger standing guard beside him. A slash wound could be seen on the side of his cheek, but aside from that superficial wound, he was mostly fine. He also had other superficial wounds here and there, but for tigerkins, this wasn't a big deal. But his condition was enough to alarm his subordinates, who thought that their captain could easily subdue the drow that he decided to fight on his own. "Captain, are you all right?" the vice captain of the scouting party asked. "Yes," the captain, who went by the name Dixon, replied. "Who is the boy, Armand?" The vice captain glanced at the 7-year-old, whom they had captured, and shook his head. I didn't ask him his name, sir, Armand replied. All I know is that he is a chosen one by a lord of death. Dixon narrowed his eyes as he looked at the black snake coiled around the boy's neck. He didn't make any comment about 13 and only shifted his attention back to his vice-captain. We need to leave, Dixon stated. That drow escaped and is bound to tell the barbarians of our presence. Let's go before a hunting party finds us. And the boy? Armand inquired. We're taking him with us. Understood, sir. But what about this monster in the cage? Is it already dead? Should we leave it here? Dixon looked at the obsidian tiger beetle, which was still alive despite the injuries that it had received, proving how tough its shell was. Let's just leave it, Dixon stated. Taking it will just slow us down. Dixon gave the monster a sidelong glance before mounting his saber-toothed tiger. A minute later, the small scouting party headed northeast in order to leave the Warzer Plains and the barbarian territories behind. 13, who was riding alongside the tigerkin lady, Alina, suddenly heard the screech of a hawk. The boy knew that the screech came from Visago, who told him that he would go find Adira and pass 13's message to her. While the drow and Blackie were out hunting the obsidian tiger beetle, one of the things that Visago and his master had talked about was the possibility of him getting captured by the tigerkin scouts. The 7-year-old stated that if that were to happen, Visago would inform Adira that he was fine and that he didn't need any rescue. He knew the code of conduct of the tigerkins and believed that they would not harm him since he was still a child. As for Tiona being treated as a sacred beast, he wasn't aware of this because the information he got from the Valbara archipelago was 300 years old. He knew who Apollyon was because the deity was also known by another name, and that was Abaddon, the deity of destruction, slaughter, and death. He was one of the 7 fiends, and he was worshipped by those who favored war over peace. I just hope Christopher doesn't get depressed while I'm away, 13 thought. Well, Visago will be there to tell him what to do, so he should be okay. At that exact moment, Adira, who had escaped from Dixon, leaned on the wall of a small cave that she found during her escape. She wasn't injured because she managed to draw first blood on her foe, and her blades contained a powerful paralyzing poison that limited the movement of her enemies. Even so, it was a 2 versus 1 battle, with Dixon's mount being a rank 5 saber-toothed tiger. Adira was unable to land a decisive blow on her enemy, so after giving him superficial wounds, she decided to escape before her opponent's party members returned. Just as she was resting, something black entered the cave, prompting the drow to raise her dagger. However, after recognizing that it was Blackie with a few arrows sticking out of its body, she finally lowered her guard. But it didn't take long for her to realize that the 7-year-old, who was supposed to be on his back, was nowhere to be seen. Where is Zion? Adira asked while frowning. The Warzer Black Hound started to whine as if trying to explain what had happened. However, since Adira couldn't understand its language, the frown on her face deepened. Suddenly, something flew inside the cave and landed several meters from Adira. Out of reflex, the drow threw her dagger at the newcomer. Fortunately, Visago had already expected this to happen, so he hopped to the side, making the dagger hit the ground beside his feet. I have been captured by the tigerkin, Visago said using 13's voice. However, you don't have to worry about me. Tigerkins don't hurt children, so I will be safe for the time being. You don't need to rescue me because I plan to find a way to escape on my own. I don't know how long I'll be kept captive, so please look after Christopher and my other slaves while I am away. Lastly, please heal the injuries of Blackie's comrades, as well as free them if they wish to leave. The Pokopoko then shifted his attention to the Warzer Black Hound, who was eyeing him with suspicion. Blackie, I don't know if Lady Adira will honor our agreement, but I can tell that she is a drow of her word. She will probably heal and release your friends. But I have another proposal for you. Since the Furvis Grasslands is now the territory of the diabolical hyena, returning there will be a very dangerous thing to do. So how about you stay with my subordinates in my base? You will receive food and shelter, and all you need to do is guard the place. Also, if you cooperate with Visago to rescue me, I will help raise your rank to rank 5. Of course, you can reject this offer if you like. The choice is yours to make. but I can guarantee that if you choose to become my subordinate, I will ensure that you will not regret it. Truth be told, 13 never said anything like the last part of the proposal to Visago, the one about raising Black's rank to rank 5 if the Black Hound decided to rescue 13 with the Poco. But what the 7-year-old did tell Poco was that he could use any means necessary to ensure a successful negotiation with Blackie and make it agree to help with his rescue. Although he was confident about being able to escape the Tigerkins, he would need a mount that could travel on land and sea. Since the Black Hound could also swim in the water for long distances, having its cooperation would increase his chances of escaping. After the Poco started talking, the Warzer Black Hound barked twice, telling Visago that his master could drink piss for all he cared. The Black Hound even complained about the arrows in his back, which made the Poco laugh in disdain, prompting Blackie to snap at the dumb bird. However, Visago had already flapped its wings to fly out of the cave, leaving an angry Blackie behind. One more thing, Visago said, still using 13's voice. The obsidian tiger beetle was left behind. If possible, can you bring it to Christopher and make it one of his slaves? I'm sure he'll be delighted to have it. The drow clicked her tongue after hearing Visago's message. Even after you've gotten yourself captured, you still treat me as one of your thugs, Adira scratched her head angrily. Damn it. Don't let me catch you, Zion. I swear I'm going to give you a good beating next time I see you. Blackie howled to show his support to Adira. The Black Hound also wanted to take a bite of the annoying 7-year-old so that it could vent out its frustrations for all the suffering he had received after accepting the boy's proposal. In the end, Adira decided to backtrack and look for the steel cage, which contained the obsidian tiger beetle. She tied it to Black's back and went to look for Christopher and the others, who were waiting for their master to return. Christopher's and the rest of 13's slaves were currently gathered behind a small hill as they waited for any sign of their master's return. The chubby boy was feeling anxious because his young master had decided to become bait in order to let them escape. Percival, on the other hand, had a different opinion. He stated that Zion must have decided to escape on his own, leaving all of them to fend for themselves. Out of anger, the chubby boy tried to punch the Tigerkin, but the latter avoided his punches with ease. Christopher wasn't really a fighter, so his close combat abilities were nearly non-existent. If not for the fact that all of 13's slaves were forbidden from harming Christopher, Percival might have already retaliated and put the chubby boy in his place. Also, the majority of the slaves were hoping that the 7-year-old would die so that their slave contract would become null and void, allowing them to regain their freedom. A few minutes later, Christopher panted for breath after numerous failed attempts to hit his target. He then glared at the Tigerkin, who had a smug smile on his face as if taunting the human to give him his best shot. Truth be told, the chubby boy could hit Percival if he really wanted. All he needed to do was to order the Tigerkin to not move and allow him to take his punches. 13 made sure that his slaves understood that Christopher was his second in command. They had to take orders from him whenever their master wasn't around, which was why all of them were still together, despite the fact that 13 slaves could have used this opportunity to escape. Christopher had ordered everyone to stay put and wait for his young master's arrival. Because of this, none of them could leave even if they wanted to. A few hours later, just before sunset, they saw a black speck moving in their direction from a distance. Everyone tensed because they thought that it was the enemy, but all of their worries disappeared when Visago landed on Giga Chad's back, making Christopher sigh in relief. Visago, is that Lady Adira and the young master? Christopher asked. No, Christopher, Visago replied using 13's voice. It's only Lady Adira and Blackie. The boy's face immediately darkened after hearing that his young master wasn't with the drow and the Black Hound who were heading their way. Told you he escaped alone, Percival said with a sneer plastered on his face. He left because he wanted to save himself and use us as bait. Shut up, Christopher growled. He was just about to pounce on the hateful Tigerkin when Visago stopped him from doing so. Stop, Christopher, Visago ordered. Zion is safe. His life isn't in any danger, so calm down and listen to my explanation later. The moment the Poco confirmed that his young master was safe, the chubby boy felt as if a weight had been taken off from his shoulders. He didn't believe for a moment that Zion had abandoned him. After all, the younger boy promised that he would do his best to clear Christopher's mission, allowing him to return to Pangea and reunite with his mother. Christopher didn't know why, but the moment he swore his loyalty to Zion, he believed that his new master would keep his word and ensure that he would survive his first wandering. Several minutes later, the drow and the black hound finally arrived at the camp where everyone was gathered. The one who guided her there was none other than Visago, who had scouted ahead in order to find Christopher and the others. Okay, since everyone is here, allow me to tell you everything that has happened ever since we parted ways with all of you, Visago said, still using 13's voice. The Poco liked using 13's voice because it held power over his slaves, making them take his words seriously. Also, it had a soothing effect on Christopher, who would soon have to man up and become the temporary leader of 13's hunting party. Visago narrated how Zion, Adira, and Blackie caught the rank 5 overlord's attention by running as close to it as possible. The Poco had fun telling everyone how Zion, despite not being able to see, was able to accurately hit the rank 5 overlord, using Visago's voice as a guide. Percival, who was listening to the story with his arms crossed over his chest, would give Adira sidelong glances from time to time as if trying to confirm whether the Poco's words were true, or if the dumb-looking bird was simply exaggerating. However, seeing that the drow wasn't reacting, Percival, as well as the other slaves, couldn't help but admit that their master was such a daring and courageous warrior. None of them would dare challenge a rank 5 overlord head-on because that was a suicidal mission. But Zion, a 7-year-old, did, making all of them reluctantly acknowledge his extraordinary feat. However, when Visago told them about how 13 led the rank 5 overlord to where the purple-furred honey badger was hiding, all of them couldn't help but feel goosebumps. This was especially true for Christopher, Percival, Jasmine, and Ariel, who felt extremely lucky for surviving their close encounter with the rank 6 overlord. They would never forget the scene of how the honey badger easily killed the 2 rank 3 ogres, who were powerless against it. If possible, they didn't want to see it again. The Poco continued his tale and gave a blow-by-blow narration on how the battle between the 2 overlords transpired. When he came to the part about the hyena overlord cannibalizing its subordinates and breaking through to the next rank, all of them felt the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Even the obsidian tiger beetle, who was resting to recover from its injury, as well as the 3 Warzer black hounds, who were still locked inside their cages, couldn't help but shudder after hearing that their home was now the new territory of a rank 6 overlord. The Furvis grasslands might be a good place to hide because the entire area was pitch black. However, they still understood that playing hide and seek with the diabolical hyena wasn't going to be a fun experience. As Visago continued his story, the eyes of Percival, Jasmine, Ariel, and the other Tigerkins lit up after hearing that a Tigerkin scouting party had made its way to the Warzer Plains. However, their hope was short-lived when the Poco told them that the scouting party had retreated in fear of Adira exposing their location. All the Tigerkins subconsciously glanced in the drow's direction, making the silver-haired beauty smirk in their direction. "I fought their captain and injured him before I escaped," Adira commented. "Don't think that he will be saving you guys anytime soon, especially since they are retreating towards the crossing." The crossing was the small divide that separated the Houdini Desert and the Barbarian lands from the Sumatran kingdom. The distance between the 2 islands was only a mile long, and the small strait that divided the 2 could easily be traversed as long as you had a small boat or a monster that could swim. This was why Visago wanted to get Black's cooperation when it came to rescuing 13. The Warzer Black Hound could swim to the side of the Tigerkins in less than 15 minutes if it truly wanted to. "Christopher, you are now the temporary leader of this hunting party," Visago stated. "My first order is for you to return to Groner City and tell Rihanna about the situation. Neither of you should worry about me, and just focus on strengthening yourself. Don't worry, I'll be back before you know it. I'll even get souvenirs for you from the Sumatran kingdom. For the time being, focus on hunting monsters and collecting monster parts. However, don't stray too far from Groner City. Visago will come to find me every few days so that we can exchange information. Also, take care of Blackie and his family. Make sure to heal the injuries of his comrades, and let them stay in the warehouse if they don't want to return to the furthest grasslands. Give them food and shelter. However, make sure they earn their keep by guarding our base. As long as they do that, they will be allowed to stay indefinitely. Lastly, I will keep my promise to you. So make sure to not slack off and do your job properly. Your mother is waiting for you back home. I don't want to hear that you kicked the bucket just because I was not around. P.S. If Taiga is being stubborn, order Giga Chad to give him a good spray. Let's see if he dares to disobey your orders. Of course, this isn't limited to Taiga only. All slaves who refuse to obey you will suffer Giga's wrath. Make sure to put him to good use. The Chad skunk, who heard 13's last words, nodded his head, and even nudged Christopher's body with his head, telling him that he was on his side. The chubby boy took a few deep breaths with his eyes closed as he digested everything that his young master had entrusted him with. When he opened his eyes again, Christopher's aura changed as if a fire of determination had been lit inside his body. Let's go back to Groner City, Christopher ordered. But we won't be going back empty-handed. We'll keep hunting monsters along the way, and those who don't cooperate will have a mouthful of Giga's homemade brew. The slaves subconsciously shuddered after hearing their temporary master's threat. Even Adira couldn't help but smile after seeing the change that came over the chubby boy, whom 13 believed would grow to become a more capable individual during his absence. 13 didn't know where they were going because he had his eyes closed most of the time. But that wasn't his real concern. Even the pain on his shoulder, which was quite uncomfortable, especially during the times when the painkiller's effect wore off, didn't bother him either. He was more worried that his slaves, who would now have to listen to Christopher, might have thoughts of rebelling. If 13 was there, none of them would even dare to raise their heads. But with the chubby boy, they might have other ideas. Even if Visago, Brutus, and Bruno were with him, Christopher wasn't really the leader type. He was more suited to following orders, which was why he didn't hesitate to listen to the younger boy's command and do them accordingly. Still, this is a good opportunity for him to grow as a person, 13 thought. Even cannon fodders need to face challenges like this early on. As the system of cannon fodders, he had seen his hosts face challenges in life that wouldn't lose to a hero's or a villain's character progression. The world didn't only have heroes, villains, and cannon fodders. It also had extras like Villager A, Merchant B, and Shopkeeper C. The bulk of the population in the world were just extras. But there was one good thing about these people, and that was that they could become whatever they wanted to be in life. Extras could become heroes, they could become villains, and they could become cannon fodders. And they could also continue living their lives as extras, like NPCs in a game world. Their character development would really depend on the person that was closest to them. If they were around a hero, they would become part of the hero's party. If they were around villains, they would become his pawns. If they were with cannon fodders, well, they would become cannon fodders themselves. Such were the lives of extras, but this was also a blessing given to them by fate. Truth be told, the 5 Tigerkin slaves that 13 had bought from the slave market were just extras. He planned to make them mingle with Percival so that they could absorb his hero presence and allow them to shift their alignment to that of a hero. The alignments of extras would always be true neutral. But, since they were like sponges, the person whom they would look up to could change their alignment to chaotic evil or lawful good. The extreme alignments of extras were chaotic neutral, where they just didn't care even if the world were to burn around them. Aside from the hero party, the trolls, ogres, Giga Chad, and Blackie were all extras. 13 wanted them to be with Percival at all times so that he could build a hero team, centered around the Tigerkin. This was part of his hero project. The Fallen system knew that fighting against fate would be hard. Because of this, he needed to beat her at her own game. The only ones that could defeat heroes were first-rate villains. 13 wasn't a first-rate villain. At most, he was a third-rate villain and a cannon fodder combined. So, since he didn't have a villain in hand, what could he do? Simple, he would just train a hero and have his hero fight other heroes. Since fate's blessing worked on all heroes, having a hero fight another hero was 13's way of creating a loophole against the will of the world. While he was deep in his thoughts, he heard the captain of the scouting party, Dixon, give his orders. "Alina, make sure the kid doesn't fall off. Dixon ordered. The rest prepare to swim. A moment later, 13 felt water rising up to his knees. I see, 13 thought. They're using the saber-toothed tigers as a mount for land and sea. Tigers were good swimmers, and since the distance between the Sumatran island and the biggest island in the Valbara archipelago were only a mile away from each other, it wouldn't take that long for them to reach the opposite shore. High above the clouds, Visago followed the scouting party at a safe distance. He needed to know where 13 was being taken, so that he could help devise a plan to let his master escape. Adira had already reunited with Christopher and the others, so the Poco wasn't worried about them reaching Groner City safely. His priority was his master's safety, so until he knew where he would be taken, he would stay with him before he returned to Groner City and report the 7-year-old's current situation to the others. Less than 20 minutes later, the saber-toothed tigers finally reached the Sumatran island, making Alina, who was holding the 7-year-old tightly, sigh in relief. Being in close proximity with a Domini Mortis made her very anxious, which made 13 almost feel sorry for her. A moment later the boy heard a monkey's cry, which made him smile faintly. Visago had also arrived at the Sumatran island, and had informed 13 that Adira had reunited with Christopher and the others. Knowing that his people were safe, he was finally able to breathe a little easier despite the pain in his left shoulder. But before he could give a reply to Visago, he heard other voices greeting the scouting party. "Dixon, why did you return so early?" a gruff voice asked. "You're supposed to stay in the Warzer Plains for 4 more days. Did something happen?" Dixon sighed before giving his reply. "I made a miscalculation. I tried to capture a drow who was traveling with this boy over here in order to ask her for information. Unfortunately, she was hiding her true rank, which was a champion. The 2 of us fought, and after a few minutes she decided to escape before the others could regroup with me. Knowing that she will report our presence, I decided to prematurely cancel our scouting operation for our safety." The owner of the gruff voice grunted, but still said that Dixon made the right call. "So, are you going to report to the general?" the owner of the gruff voice asked. "Yes," Dixon replied. "I have important news to report to him. Also, tell the watchers over our shorelines that the barbarians are already preparing for war. It is highly possible that they might raid the villages with a small raiding party in order to divert our attention." "Understood. I'll make sure to double our patrols and guards along the shoreline." "Good. I'm off to see the general." After that exchange, the scouting party began moving deeper into the Sumatran jungle, where the rest of the Tigerkins lived. After 2 hours of travel, the scouting party arrived at their destination. It was the 2nd largest city near the coast of the Sumatran kingdom, and it was called Karabayar City. The size of the city was 2 square kilometers, and it had a population numbering around 15,000. A third of the population were all warriors, but not all of them were Tigerkins. In fact, a quarter of them were former inhabitants of the Valbara kingdom, and they were all humans. After losing the war, the Tigerkins didn't commit mass murder and spared those who had surrendered to their rule. In fact, a third of the population of the entire Sumatran kingdom was made up of humans who had learned to live alongside the Tigerkins and were treated with equal standing. It was for this reason that there had been no rebellion from the humans during the past few years of the Tigerkins' rule, and why both races lived in harmony despite their differences. Ironically, the Valbarians and the Barbarians were also enemies in the past. So when they heard that the Barbarians were planning to invade their cities, the humans living alongside the Tigerkins were willing to assist them in battle. "Welcome to Karabayar City, Zion," Alina said. "It's too bad that you can't see it right now." "I'm sure I'll get to see it after a few days, Lady Alina," 13 replied. "Don't worry. Once we arrive at the general's residence, I'll have one of the shamans there take a good look at you. That will be great. Thank you for your help." The vice captain of their scouting party, Armand, glanced at the carefree boy and wondered if Zion really understood his current circumstances. While they didn't harm him, he was, in fact, still their prisoner. But the boy was so indifferent about it, making him wonder if he was simply too innocent or completely ignorant. Since he couldn't see, 13 just allowed himself to be taken wherever the scouting party was going. Finally, after what seemed like forever, they finally arrived at their destination, which was the general's residence. "Dixon, why are you back so early?" the guard at the gate of the residence asked. "Do you want the long story or the short one?" Dixon replied in an amused tone. "The short one. We came, we saw, we returned here." The guard snorted before opening the gate. Clearly, this wasn't the kind of short story he wanted to hear, but since he had known Dixon long enough, he knew that the Tigerkin wouldn't say anything unless the general had allowed him to share the information he had obtained with the others. After entering the residence, he ordered Alina to take Zion to the infirmary so that he could receive medical attention. He also didn't want the boy to be present as he talked about top-secret information regarding their expedition in the Barbarian lands. Inside the infirmary, "Open your eyes," a middle-aged man, who served as the shaman in the infirmary, ordered. "Let me see what is wrong with your eyes." 13 obeyed and slowly opened his eyes. The first thing the 7-year-old saw was the blurry image of a man, but since he couldn't see properly, he was unable to determine the person's age and appearance. The shaman looked at the young man's eyes, which looked perfectly normal, and yet he could tell that the boy was having a hard time seeing. "What happened?" the shaman asked. "Since when did you lose your vision?" "I lost it nearly 2 days ago," 13 replied. "I just strained my eyes. I just need a few days rest and my vision will be back to normal." "You strained your eyes?" The shaman sounded amused by 13's reply. "And what makes you so sure that you will regain your vision after resting for a few days?" "Men's intuition." Pfft. The shaman laughed out loud after hearing the young boy's words, who couldn't be considered a man. "I see, men's intuition, huh?" The shaman smirked as he placed his hands over the boy's eyes. "But I have a better solution." The shaman's hands glowed with power, and 13 felt a soothing feeling wash over his face. A moment later, the shaman pulled back his hands and looked at the boy, whose eyes had subconsciously closed after he activated his healing power on his eyes. "Open your eyes," the shaman ordered. Slowly, but surely, 13 opened his eyes, and just like he expected, he was finally able to see. The first person he saw was a middle-aged man wearing tribal clothes, with several bone necklaces hanging around his neck. "Well met, child," the shaman said. "I go by the name Rafiki. What is yours?" "Zion," 13 replied. "Zion Leventis." "Zion, what an interesting name." Rafiki rubbed his chin. "So, tell me, Death's Chosen, what brings you here to Karaber City?" 13 didn't reply right away. His first reaction was to glance at the Tigerkin lady standing a meter away from him before shifting his attention back to the middle-aged man, who looked like a shaman of a tribe. "I was captured by them while traveling in the Warzer Plains," 13 replied. "Ah, I see." Rafiki nodded his head in understanding. "So you're just an unlucky passerby." "Something like that." 13 smiled faintly. Rafiki eyed the boy, who seemed to not have any problem with being captured by the Tigerkins. "So, what are you going to do from now on?" "Eat some local delicacies, visit attractions, buy souvenirs, and go back home?" 13 answered. Tiona, who was coiled on the boy's neck, nodded her head in agreement because she liked the idea of exploring the city with her master. The boy's answer made the shaman laugh for a second time. Even Alina, who was tasked to guard after 13, couldn't help but smile after hearing the 7-year-old's positive reply. After the shaman stopped laughing, he patted the boy's shoulder in a friendly manner. "Well, I'm sure that the Sumatrans will not mistreat you as long as you don't do anything that will hurt their people or hurt their interests. They may look fierce, but they are not as savage as their appearance." 13 didn't know how he should reply to Rafiki's statement because he planned to do many things while he was in the Tigerkin city. One of them was to better understand how they were preparing for the upcoming war, and the second one was to better understand the purpose of this war. Just as 13 was about to ask the shaman a question, a Tigerkin lady entered the infirmary, making Rafiki and Alina bow their heads in respect. "You must be our guest," the beautiful Tigerkin said with a smile. "My name is Briella, and from this moment onwards, you will become my adopted son." "Huh." 13 looked blankly at the Tigerkin lady in front of him, while Rafiki's and Alina's jaws dropped in surprise. Even Tiona, who was hanging from her master's neck, looked at the Tigerkin lady in disbelief, wondering if there was something wrong with the Tigerkin lady's head. Briella blinked in confusion after seeing everyone's reaction. What? Is there something wrong with what I just said? Briella asked. There's plenty wrong, Rafiki answered. My lady, I don't think this is an appropriate thing to say, especially since young Master Percival is currently missing, Alina said with concern. 13 and Tiona both glanced at Alina at the same time after hearing a familiar name. They only knew one tigerkin who had the name Percival, and they were wondering if Alina was referring to the same person who had suffered a lot in 13's hands. Zion. I'll show you around the residence. An excited Briella grabbed Zion's hand and started to drag him away, not even the least bit worried about the black snake, who was angrily hissing at her. Calm down, Tiona, 13 said when the snake crawled on the boy's shoulder, headed toward Briella's hand, which was holding her master's hand. Don't bite, okay? Tiona hissed angrily at the woman and even used her tail to repeatedly tap her hand as if trying to pry it away from her master's. Aw, how cute, Briella commented after feeling the black snake's attempt to pry off her hand from 13's hand. Your pet is quite amusing. Yeah. 13 didn't know if Briella was fearless or if she simply didn't know that the black snake, whom she was calling cute, was actually the most poisonous snake in the world. Although Tiona's bite would not instantly kill her, it would make her suffer terrible pain as her body withered away due to its poison. This is the garden, Briella said after arriving at the place that was filled with flowers. I personally picked all the flowers planted here. Aren't they beautiful? The boy arched an eyebrow after seeing the beautiful flowers, which were all poisonous. Beautiful and deadly, 13 commented. You have good taste, Lady Briella. I know, right? The younger boy now understood why the tigerkin lady found Tiona cute. It was because she liked to handle poison, so whenever she found anything poisonous, it was cute or beautiful in her eyes. As the two toured the garden, 13 had to fight the strong urge to collect some of the poisonous flowers in order to use them in alchemy. Some of the flowers that were blooming in the garden were actually rare herbs, and they were not often found within the human territories of Solterra. Seeing the boy's interest in her flowers, the smile on Briella's face widened. Do you know what this flower is, Zion? Briella asked as she pointed at a beautiful purple flower. It's called the sleepy wolfsbane, 13 replied. If someone were to eat any part of this flower, they would feel drowsy, but it is only the side effect of the poison that is spreading inside their bodies. If not treated right away, the victim might enter a coma and die after a few months. Touching it can irritate the skin, causing purple sores to appear at the place of contact. Turning this into powder and slipping it on the food or drinks of people is the ideal way to use it. That way, people would die in their sleep, making others think that they died because of a nightmare or a sweet dream that they refused to wake up from. Briella clapped her hand because she didn't expect that the boy would be able to identify the flower, let alone give her its information. You know a lot about flowers, Zion, Briella said. I don't know a lot, Lady Briella, 13 smiled. I just know what I know. Can I have a few flowers later? Briella giggled after hearing the boy's request. Who are you planning to kill, Zion? Briella asked. Just say the word and Mother will help you. The smile on 13's face twitched because he didn't know if Briella was just teasing her or was serious about making him her adoptive son. Either way, he already had a mother, so he had no intention of being adopted by anyone. You know, Zion, I have good eyes and a very sensitive nose, Briella said as she took a stroll while holding the boy's hand. I know when a person is dangerous or when a person is not. And I have never seen someone as young yet as dangerous as you in my life. You are just like the sleepy wolfsbane. You lull your victim to sleep and make sure they don't wake up ever again. Are you sure you don't want to be adopted by me? I'm sorry, but I already have a mother, Lady Briella, 13 replied. I'm afraid I can't accept your offer of adoption. Understood. You want me to become your adopted mother? Briella nodded. From this day onward, feel free to call me Mother, Zion. The 7-year-old didn't know if Briella had selective hearing or if the two of them weren't speaking the same language. Anyway, he knew that the tigerkin that was holding his hand was dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Although she was smiling sweetly right now, the boy knew that she could have the same smile, as she poisoned people to death. There you are, mother, a tigerkin, who seemed to be in his early 20s, called out to Briella from a distance. I've been looking everywhere for you. The smile on Briella's face stiffened, but this only lasted for a second before she introduced Zion to the tigerkin that was approaching them. Zion, this is Anwer, Briella said. He is my adopted son. Anwer, this is Zion, my new adopted son. Anwer's gaze hardened as he looked at the 7-year-old human, whom Briella was holding hands with. Mother, you shouldn't joke around like that, Anwer stated. Father asked me to find you as well as our guest here. He wants to have a talk with him. Is that so? Briella replied casually before nodding her head. Let's go, Zion. It's time to meet your adopted father. The tigerkin lady dragged Zion away without even bothering to look at her other adopted son, who was glaring at Zion's back. 13 glanced behind him and looked at the boy, who changed his expression in the blink of an eye and smiled back at him. I think I understand this setup, 13 thought. I see, so that's how it is. The 7-year-old was a system, so he could see the pattern when it came to the relationship of people. With his thousands of years of experience, it was fairly easy for him to guess why Briella didn't like Anwer. While some people didn't jump to conclusions based on conjecture, 13 was different. He was a system. He didn't need any proof or evidence. All he needed to do was calculate things inside his head, and he would arrive at an answer with the highest probability. Too bad there isn't any popcorn here that I can munch on while I watch this family drama, 13 thought. Still, if I play my cards right, this trip to Carabaer City might be more advantageous to me in more ways than one. Since Briella was looking in front of her, she didn't see the evil smile that appeared on 13's face. Only Tiona, who was paying close attention to her master, noticed the changes on his face. This prompted her to rub her head on his cheek as if telling 13 to let her join in on the fun once the 7-year-old finally dared to take action. So you are the child named Zion, correct? Asked a tigerkin, who had a scar that crossed his forehead and partway down his cheek, in a cold tone. 13 stared at the tigerkin in front of him, who seemed to be in his early 40s, with a curious look on his face. Ages were a bit hard to tell in both Pangea and Solterra. Someone who looked like a teenage boy might actually be someone already in their early 30s and only had a youthful appearance due to having a high rank. The 7-year-old might not be able to tell how old the tigerkin was, but he could tell what his rank was. A peak champion, 13 thought. Someone similar to Grandma Callista. He had already expected that the general whom Dixon was referring to was someone who had a high rank, so he wasn't too surprised by this development. Dixon himself was a champion, so it was only natural that the one he was taking orders from was someone stronger than him. Yes. 13 nodded. My name is Zion. Zion Leventus. The tigerkin nodded. I am General Stark. My family name is Evander. According to my subordinates, you were with a drow, right? Is she your master? No, 13 replied. My master is a high orc named Jubii. The boy made sure to keep his story to match the narrative that he had made in Groner City. Any inconsistencies might come to bite him later, so it was in his best interest to stick to the background he created. Then why were you with the drow? General Stark asked. Dixon said that you were riding with her when they found you. My master had asked me to go to the furthest grasslands to hunt some monsters alongside other slaves, 13 answered. The drow, Lady Adira, was there to keep watch over us and supervise the hunting operation. Other slaves? General Stark arched an eyebrow. When my men found you, there was only you and the drow. Where are these other slaves that you speak of? Briella, Dixon, Alina, and Anwer, who had entered the office just a few minutes ago, perked up their ears to listen to the boy's explanation. Originally, we were all together in the camp we have made in the furthest grasslands, 13 explained. But something unexpected happened. The boy explained about the monster stampede, which forced them to evacuate their camp. He added that, knowing that they would be overtaken by the enemies, he was forced to distract the golden-eyed hyenas by acting as bait in order to draw their attention away. General Stark and the rest of the tigerkins inside the room listened to 13's tale without interrupting him. When the boy was done, General Stark snorted. You expect me to believe that story? General Stark asked in a cold tone. A drow, who is only a supervisor of a slave-hunting party, would actually dare to risk her life in order to save her slave subordinates? I find this hard to believe. Also, the part where the two of you acted as bait in order to help the purple-furred honey badger ambush the leader of the golden hyena is an amazing feat. If it were true, I would have commended that drow in you for your bravery. But I'm finding it hard to believe that your story is an actual fact, and not just a fabrication by your delusions. However, I have to admit that it is an interesting story, especially told by a child of your age. You have a talent for telling stories, Zion. 13 remained calm despite the contemptuous gaze that was being shot in his direction, coming from one of the best generals of the Sumatran kingdom. Whether you believe it or not is up to you to decide, 13 commented. But if a general of your caliber can't even distinguish fact from delusion, then I guess the generals of the Tigerkins are more incompetent than I thought. No wonder you lost to the Barbarians. A pin-drop silence descended inside the room as Dixon, Alina, and Anwar looked at the boy in disbelief. Boy, are you speaking so boldly because you know that we Tigerkins don't hurt children? General Stark narrowed his eyes. Are you testing whether I will uphold our warrior's code or not? Yes. 13 nodded. For you to figure that out, you're not as dumb as you look, General. Dixon and Alina felt a chill run down their spine because they could feel that their general was starting to get angry. They couldn't understand why a human boy could act so brazen in front of a Tigerkin who could easily twist his neck in a heartbeat. Anwar, who didn't like 13 from the start because Briella had introduced the boy to him as her adopted son, was laughing inside his heart. Fool. Anwar sneered. Out of all the people you dared to mock, you chose my adoptive father. Simply courting death. Just as everyone thought that the 7-year-old would get his just desserts, a giggle echoed inside the office as Briella, who was General Stark's wife, giggled. You're amazing, Zion, Briella praised as she walked toward the younger boy and hugged him from behind. What do you think, Stark? Our adopted son is quite funny and brave, right? General Stark, who was very tempted to torture the boy, frowned after hearing his wife's words. What are you talking about? General Stark asked in disbelief. Briella, are you mad? I will adopt Zion, Briella stated in a firm tone. Whether you like it or not. Briella's gaze was firm as she faced off against General Stark's own gaze, which was filled with disbelief and confusion. Do I have a say in this? 13, who was being hugged from behind by the Tigerkin lady, raised a hand. You don't, Briella patted the boy's head before glaring at her husband. From this day onward, Zion is my adopted son. If you have a problem with my decision, make sure to find Percival first and bring him back to me. If you can't do that, then shut up and keep on looking for him. Let's go, Zion. I'll get you something good to eat. Just like earlier, the 7-year-old had no choice but to get dragged away by the Tigerkin lady, whom even General Stark was unable to defy. Earlier, he was provoking the Tigerkin general on purpose because he wanted to confirm a few things from him. One of the things he didn't understand was the title that Dixon and the others had referred to him by, which was Death's Chosen. This title was given to him due to Tiona staying by his side. His purpose for angering the general was to know if being the Death's Chosen would allow him to remain unscathed, even with the fury of one of the highest-ranking Tigerkins in the kingdom. He truly wasn't really worried about the general killing him. Sure, the general could have broken one of his bones or hurt him a little, but there was no chance of him dying in that place. The worst that could happen to him was to be imprisoned, and it would end at that. Every word that has escaped the boy's lips was all calculated, bringing out the result he wanted. Tigerkins followed the warrior's code with their life. As a general, he must set an example to his subordinates and not break such an important rule, which could cause him to lose his position within their army. Also, 13 was testing whether Briella would interfere if her husband really attempted to hurt him. The 7-year-old didn't mind pain. What he wanted was facts. Facts that would allow him to know what the bottom line of the people around him was and calculate how he should use it to his advantage during his stay in the Sumatran kingdom. Zion, that's no good, Briella said as she and the boy walked hand in hand down the hallways of their residence. You shouldn't test my husband's patience like that. He has been on edge ever since our son disappeared, so do not provoke him." "Understood, Lady Briella," 13 replied. "Now, what do you want to eat?" Briella inquired. "I'm not picky with food," 13 answered. "Vegetables then." "On second thought, can I have some meat?" The tigerkin lady giggled before nodding her head. Briella might look very carefree, but the boy knew that she wasn't as simple as she portrayed herself to be. Every time she referred to him as an adoptive son, he called her Lady Briella. However, whenever he did, the beautiful tigerkin didn't correct him or say anything like, "Stop calling me Lady Briella, and call me mother or mama." This confirmed his suspicion that Briella wasn't really serious about making him her adoptive son. She was simply calling him that for reasons that only she knew about. When they arrived in the dining room, they saw another tigerkin with hair that only reached their shoulders. The tigerkin had their back facing them, so the 7-year-old was unable to see what the person looked like. "So you're here, Cleo," Briella said. "Perfect timing. I'd like you to meet the newest member of our family." Cleo, who had just been called, turned around and met 13's gaze. 13 assumed that Cleo was another one of Briella's sons. But after hearing her name and seeing the bulge on her chest, he immediately realized that she was actually a girl. The most striking feature of Cleo was her eyes. Unlike her parents, who both had blue eyes, Cleo had mixed-colored eyes of purple and green. "It's you," Cleo muttered. "That boy I always see in my dreams." The young lady's gaze then landed on the black snake coiled around the boy's neck, further confirming her suspicion. "Mother, he is the boy that I told you, Abu." But before Cleo could finish whatever she was going to say, Briella held up her hand, cutting her off completely. "Let's talk about it later, dear," Briella stated before glancing at the maids. "Please prepare the food. We will dine first because my husband is busy." "Yes, Lady Briella." The head maid, who was a human, nodded and motioned for the other maids to start serving food on the table. Cleo obeyed her mother, but her gaze locked on 13's body as if trying to make sure that he was the same boy whom she had been seeing in her dreams. 13 sat calmly on his chair and waited for the food to be served. "This family is more interesting than I thought," 13 thought. If this is really Taiga's family, then it fits his heroic background perfectly. Although 13 wasn't 100% sure that Briella and General Stark were really Taiga's parents, he believed that his hunch had a high chance of being accurate. All he needed to do was do a little more prodding before he could confirm his suspicion, which he would do as soon as an opportunity presented itself. He was also curious because Cleo seemed to know him, or at least, knew him through her dreams. "Here, Zion. Eat a lot so you will grow big and strong," Briella said while placing several meat dishes on the boy's plate. After making sure that his plate was filled with food, Briella took out a beast core from her storage ring that was the size of a golf ball. She then placed it beside 13's plate before pointing at Tiona. "This is for her." Briella winked. 13 nodded in understanding and picked up the beast core to feed Tiona. The black snake swallowed it whole, and once she did, a satisfied look appeared on her face. She could digest lower-ranked cores in less than a minute, so the small bulge it created in her body disappeared soon after. After feeding his beast companion, 13 began to eat heartily because he was truly hungry. The scouting party had neither rested nor eaten until after they had reunited with their captain. They had hurriedly left the Barbarian lands in fear of being discovered by their enemies' hunting parties. The three people ate in a lively atmosphere, with Briella asking Zion a few questions about his master and the other slaves that he had been with. The boy answered the questions but made sure to not mention Percival. However, he did mention that there were other tigerkins in their hunting party, which made Cleo's frown deepen. "Hey, is my—" Cleo stopped her question midway after seeing her mother give her a warning gaze. The young lady then lowered her head and ate her food in silence. "Cleo, we'll have a talk later, okay?" Briella stated. "Yes, mother," Cleo replied in a timid voice, not daring to defy her mother. 13 didn't fail to notice their small interaction and came up with the conclusion that Briella might be the true voice of the family, outranking even her husband. Although her rank was only at the Grandmaster level, no one at the General's residence seemed to be able to defy her, including her husband, whom she had left behind in his office. After they finished eating lunch, Briella took him to the room where he was going to stay for the time being. "If you need anything, just ask the maid that is stationed in front of your door," Briella stated. "Her name is Ada, and she will be your personal maid during your stay here." 13 nodded. "Understood." After making sure that he didn't need anything else, Briella walked toward the door. However, before she left, she glanced at the 7-year-old and smiled. "By the way, my profession is a seer," Briella declared before giving the boy a wink. "See you later, Zion." After saying those words, the tigerkin lady finally left, leaving 13 scratching his head. "It's all falling into place," 13 muttered before picking up a chair and placing it near the window of his room. "Now I understand. So she is a seer." Briella had admitted her profession to Zion on her own accord, making the boy understand why she was trying to get close to him. A moment later, he started to make chirping sounds, mimicking the sound of the birds that were chirping on the trees in front of his window. After a few minutes, a Poco landed by the windowsill and looked at his master, who had a complicated look on his face. "Visago, I need you to confirm something for me." 13 then began to tell the Poco about the message that he wanted to pass to Christopher and Taiga, who were on their way to Groner City. "Fate sure knows how to play a joke," Visago commented after his master finished telling him what to do. "I don't believe in coincidences, master. How about you?" "I don't believe in fate if that's what you're asking," 13 replied. "You don't believe in fate, master?" "No." The Poco eyed the boy for half a minute before nodding his head. "Be safe, master," Visago said as he opened his wings. "I'll be back as soon as I can." "Safe trip, Visago," 13 stated. "Don't worry. You know where to find me." After that brief exchange, the Poco finally took flight. This time, he was headed toward the Barbarian lands, where the hero of the Tigerkins was currently traveling back to their base in Groner City, unaware that the one person whom he hated the most was currently living in the house where he had spent the majority of his childhood. For days after 13 arrived in the Sumatran kingdom. "What? Zion has been captured." Rihanna's face turned pale after hearing Christopher's report. She was waiting patiently for 13 because she believed that her hunting party was now ready to collaborate with him to challenge the monsters in the Warzer Plains. But after hearing the chubby boy's story, she felt that it was too soon for her hunting party to set forth in that direction. "Yes, the young master has been captured," Christopher replied helplessly. "But I believe that he will be fine. Visago had sent me a message from him, and he said that he would return as soon as he could." "Then what do we do now?" Rihanna asked. It was only after learning that the 7-year-old boy was gone did Rihanna suddenly realized how much she had relied on Zion. It would not be an exaggeration to say that someone younger than her had held her hand and pulled her up, guiding her to stand on her own. Thanks to Zion's help, she managed to buy the slaves in the slave market, allowing her to form her own hunting party, who could now support themselves through the selling of monster parts from their expeditions. Even so, Rihanna had already considered 13 as the leader of their group, so his absence made her feel at a loss for what to do. Seeing her reaction, Christopher suddenly remembered something that Visago had said before he left. "The young master also left a message for you," Christopher stated. "He said that you should just focus on hunting in the Houdini Desert for now because the Warzer Plains is teeming up with strife. Also, he asked you to tell Harry that he is currently doing an undercover mission in the Sumatran kingdom to better understand the situation about the war." "Anything else?" Rihanna asked, hoping that there was more. "Well, that's all Visago told me a few days ago," Christopher sighed. "But the Poco told me that he would go find 13 and ensure that he is safe first. After that, he would find a way to pass messages between us and him." The two were currently talking inside 13's room, where they always go to whenever they talk about important things. This was the command room of their operations, and no one was allowed to go near it, with the exception of Giga Chad, who had treated 13's room as his own. No one really wanted to defy the Chad skunk. If he got angry, the aggressor would regret it for days on end. While the two teenagers were thinking of what to do next, something entered through the window and landed on the table. Christopher almost jumped up in joy after seeing the familiar dumb-looking bird had arrived as he promised. "Visago!" Christopher hurriedly went to the table to talk to the Poco. Did you find the young master? Is he safe? The Poco glanced at the chubby boy and the young lady, whom his master had said to be his subordinate. However, 13 cautioned Visego to not reveal his intelligence to Rihanna. Although they were close and the boy trusted her to a certain extent, he still didn't fully trust her yet. She wasn't like Christopher, who had sworn loyalty to him, so some of his secrets had to remain a secret to her. Water! Visego shouted at the chubby boy. And nuts. Weiss. Right away, sir. Christopher hurriedly took 2 bowls and filled one of them with water. He then went to the jar filled with nuts, which 13 had kept to feed the Poco. Visego ate and drank his fill first. His journey back from the Sumatran kingdom hadn't been easy. Although he could have returned to Groner City in a day of travel, 13 had asked him to check a few places to confirm his suspicions. The 7-year-old had asked Visego to look for the location of the purple-furred honey badger, as well as the current situation of the diabolical hyena. These 2 rank 6 overlords were the 2 powerhouses of the Warzer Plains, and knowing their current conditions was very important for the sake of his hunting group. The younger boy decided that Christopher couldn't remain idle and must do his best to become stronger, as well as train the slaves at the same time. Because of this, 13 needed them to continue hunting. But this time, they would only hunt near the territory of Groner City so that they wouldn't clash with the 2 overlords, who were still recovering from their recent battle. After eating and drinking, Visego glanced at the 2 teenagers before passing 13's message to them. I am safe and sound, 13 said. I am currently in a city called Karabayar City in the Sumatran kingdom. Although I was captured, I didn't lose my freedom, and I am eating better than all of you back in the warehouse. I even get to eat steak here, and I have to admit that it tasted better than what I had back home. So, do not feel anxious or fear for my safety, for I am in good health. After hearing Visego's report, Christopher and Rihanna both sighed in relief because some of their worries had disappeared. Now, let's go to other topics. Visego continued his report, still using 13's voice in order to make the 2 teenagers feel as if the 7-year-old was the one talking in front of them. Christopher, like I said before, you will become the temporary leader of the hunting party while I am away. Your mission is to hunt as many monsters as possible to accumulate resources for our team. Also, make sure that Taiga and his party will always be fighting on the front lines. They are free to do whatever they want, but they have to always be together when they are fighting. Whenever you return from your hunt, continue to make arrows and spears. Our supplies of paralyzing arrows are now gone, so you should either capture a beast that produces a similar venom or buy one from the slave market. I left half of my money in a small pouch under my bed, so use those funds if necessary. But remember, spend it wisely. You are still not like Rihanna, who has now become self-sufficient. A faint smile appeared on Rihanna's lips after hearing the 7-year-old's praise. She still didn't understand why she felt so happy being complimented by the boy who was at least 6 years younger than her. I know that you are not the leader type, Christopher, and I apologize for forcing you into this role, Visego said softly, imitating the softness in 13's voice when he said this part of his message. But from the day you have sworn loyalty to me, I have already considered you as my right-hand man. Even if I were to gain more followers and subordinates in the future, you will still be my right-hand man, so I need you to be strong even when I am not by your side. You may not be smart or strong, but you have something that others don't, and that is perseverance. So, Christopher, what I want you to do is persevere. There will be times when the 2 of us will not always be together, and I can't always be there for you when you need me the most. But you are my right-hand man, and that means that you have to become strong enough to stand on your own, so once we meet each other again, you will have become a brand new and better you. You don't have to act like me, Christopher. Just be yourself. But if the slaves don't listen to you, tell them this: I shall return, and when I do, those who didn't follow your orders will regret it till their last breath. So, don't be afraid to order them around. Even if the world becomes your enemy, I will remain by your side. So, show them what you got. Christopher couldn't help but cover his eyes with his hand as tears fell down his face. He tried so hard to hold it back, but in the end, the dam broke and his tears fell like rain. Rihanna, who saw him crying, rubbed his back to make him feel a little better. She was moved and even felt a little envious of Christopher because she could tell that 13 really thought of him as someone important, which was very different from how the 7-year-old treated her. The young lady wished that Zion would rely on her more as well. This made her more determined to work harder as the leader of her hunting party, proving to the younger boy that she could also become his strength and not drag him down in the battles ahead. "Why did you call me here, Christopher?" Percival asked in annoyance after Brutus took him to 13's room because his master was calling for him. "I have some questions to ask you, Taiga." The tigerkin subconsciously straightened up after hearing the 7-year-old's voice, who had given him a very traumatic experience. However, after realizing that the voice that talked to him was from Visago, Percival couldn't help but feel anger rising in his chest. "You dumb bird, what do you want?" Percival asked in anger in an attempt to mask his embarrassment. He didn't want to admit it, but his fear of 13 was now firmly rooted in his heart and mind. "Tell me, Taiga, is the name of your father Stark Evander?" Visago asked. "Or should I call him General Stark?" The tigerkin immediately quieted down after hearing Visago's question. Seeing his stance and expression, the Poco shrugged and asked another question. "Is the name of your mother Briella Evander?" Visago eyed the tigerkin, paying close attention to his features. "Is your sister's name Cleo Evander?" "Last, but not the least, is your brother's name Anwer Evander?" "That traitor is no brother of mine." Percival growled. "Never speak his name in front of me again." The Poco nodded because his master's suspicions had now been confirmed. "Right now, I am in the Sumatran kingdom, living in your family's residence," Visago said in a teasing tone using 13's voice. "Did you know? Your mother even wanted to adopt me and make me her son." A look of disbelief appeared on the tigerkin's face, which made Visago chuckle. "What's so surprising about it?" Visago inquired. "How do you think I know about your family's name? Why do you think I'm talking about this topic right now?" "You're lying," Percival said through gritted teeth. "You're just messing with me." "Whether you believe it or not is up to you," Visago replied. "Just to let you know, the name of the captain of the scouting party that caught me is Dixon. His vice-captain is named Armand, and the two others are called Thane and Alina. There is also a human shaman in your residence, and his name is Rafiki. But enough about them. The reason why I'm telling you this is because your brother, Anwer, is planning something." The moment Percival heard this statement, his face turned grim, making the Poco wonder how his master was able to know that the tigerkin would react if he said something along the lines of, "Anwer is planning something." "What is he planning?" Percival demanded. "What is that snake planning to do to my family?" "Calm down," Visago ordered. "Before I tell you anything, you must tell me exactly how you've been captured by the slave traders. By doing so, I will help you expose your traitorous brother to your family. Who knows, I might be kind enough to return you to your family. But this will depend on your attitude. If you behave and listen to Christopher's orders, I'll consider returning you to your family after a year. If not, well, you can spend the rest of your days as a slave, never to see them again." A look of shock briefly appeared on Percival's face before it was replaced by determination. "Will you really return me to my family?" Percival asked. "Will you?" "Like I said, it depends on your attitude," Visago said in a teasing tone. "If you listen to Christopher's orders and work hard for my sake, I will allow you to see your family. That I promise to you. Now, tell me how you became a slave. If you do that, I will consider helping you get rid of the snake in your family." Faced with such a choice, Percival clenched his fists as the frustrations that he had kept inside his heart burst out like a tide. He told the Poco everything that happened to him from start to finish, starting with how his stepbrother, Anwer, said that they should help patrol the borders of their kingdom against the barbarian raiders. Percival narrated how Anwer purposely left him behind so that the barbarians could capture him. "And do you know his motive?" Visago asked. "I only have a hunch, but I believe that he wanted to be the only son of our family." Percival was clenching his fists so hard that they were making noises. "I overheard him talking with his subordinates in the barracks that he was also planning to marry my sister, Cleo, and take care of our family business." Visago tilted his head to the side. Anything else? Aside from marrying into your family, do you know if he has any other motives? What about his biological parents? What is their relationship with your family? His parents? Percival frowned. I only knew about his biological father. He was one of the captains who served under my father, and he considered him as his right-hand man. Because of this, when he died during the battle with the barbarians, my father decided to adopt that bastard to our family. I wish he never did that. I feel disgusted every time I think about how I called that person my brother for nearly 5 years. Visago stayed silent for a bit and pressed for more answers. His master had asked him to understand Anwer's true motive so that he could deal with him after getting the information he needed from Percival. Do you know how his father died? Visago inquired. I only heard rumors, Percival replied. They said that my father ordered Anwer's father and his subordinates to conduct a raid, which was equivalent to a suicide mission. Although they succeeded, many soldiers died during that incident. Visago lightly tapped his foot on the table. Is there anything else that you would like to add? None. Percival shook his head. I've told you everything I know. Understood. Visago nodded. I will pass the information you told me to our master. Remember, from this point onward, you will listen to Christopher's orders. Of course, if you don't want to see your family again, feel free to defy him. If you do that, Visago's chuckle was the exact copy of 13's evil chuckle, making even Christopher shudder after hearing it. Percival, on the other hand, felt conflicted after knowing that his master was currently living with his family. He wanted to see them again, and he wished that he never listened to Anwer, who schemed to get him captured by the barbarians from the start. I will do as you say, Percival said. Will you really let me see my family after a year? Didn't I tell you? Visago shrugged. That will depend on your attitude. Now, behave and listen to Christopher's orders. The Poco then glanced at the chubby boy before opening his wings. I leave everything here to you, Christopher, Visago said. I'll be back after a few days. After saying those words, Visago flew out of the window and headed north towards the Sumatran kingdom. Even now, the Poco was quite impressed because his master's hunch was right. 13 already knew about the possibility that Anwer was doing this for revenge, but he didn't know the reason for that revenge. Now that Visago obtained the information that he needed, it was only a matter of time before the young boy obtained a new puppet that he could manipulate to do his bidding. I see. 13 muttered as he sat on the window hook in his room. The hooting of an owl sounded in the distance as Visago continued to inform his master of everything that he learned from Taiga about his stepbrother Anwer. Several minutes later, the hooting stopped, which concluded Visago's report. 13 then started to chirp, thanking Visago for his report. Stay for a few days. There are a few things I need you to do for me, Visago. Understood, Master. After that brief exchange, 13 got up and closed the window of his room before lying down on his bed. As a system, these kinds of events weren't new to him. The Poco's report only confirmed his hunch, which gave him the signal to proceed to the next step of his plans. He had been staying in the general's residence for 5 days, and during that time, he had learned quite a bit about the Evander family. Briella, who would often introduce him to others as her adopted son, treated Anwer coldly. According to Rafiki, this wasn't the case in the past because she truly cared for him like her own son. The change in her attitude toward Anwer all happened when Percival was captured by the Barbarian raiding party. Ever since that day, she wouldn't even talk to Anwer unless absolutely necessary. Cleo, who was Percival's older sister, would often look at him from a distance. However, she never took the initiative to approach him. She even looked at 13 with a fearful gaze as if she was looking at something very scary. General Stark, on the other hand, tolerated his existence, but the former never talked to him even once. The only ones who always talked to him were Briella, Rafiki, and Alina, whom the general had ordered to serve as 13's guard. Of course, they couldn't allow him to freely wander everywhere or leave the residence as he wished. That was why they had assigned him a protector, but Alina's true purpose was to ensure that he didn't try to escape the residence and return to the barbarian lands. After nearly 10 minutes of silence, 13 opened his eyes and a faint smile appeared on his face. Seriously, this family is the best, 13 thought. Not only did they produce a hero, they even adopted a second-rate villain. What a stroke of luck. Aside from raising a hero, 13 was planning to raise a villain as well. But the problem is that finding a true villain was just as hard as finding a hero. Fortunately, he found Percival when he was still young, allowing him to bring the Tigerkin under his wing. Truth be told, the growth paths of heroes and villains were very identical. Almost all of them would suffer a tragedy, which would become a turning point in their life. This turning point would force them to make a choice. They would either choose to take the righteous path and become a hero or take the thorny path of revenge and become a villain. Right now, Anwar is just a second-rate, or maybe even a third-rate villain, 13 mused. But this is normal since he has just started to take the villain route. The fastest way to make a villain grow is through desperation. Fortunately, it is very easy to make him fall into despair. The smile on the boy's face widened because he could already envision the outcome in his mind. I've already stayed long enough in this place. I think I need to start the next phase of the plan. After confirming the things he needed to do in the last few days, 13 closed his eyes to rest. A few minutes later, he had a dream where Percival and his stepbrother, Anwar, were pulling his carriage together as he took a nap on Giga Chad's back. Somewhere in the Evander residence. "Mother, I saw that dream again," Cleo said while her body shuddered uncontrollably. Zion was standing on a hill while everything around him burned in flames. Countless meteors fell from the heavens, dyeing the ground red with the blood of our people and barbarians alike. "Mother, I'm scared. Is he perhaps a demon in disguise? Maybe we should ask Father to imprison him. That way, that dream of mine will not come to pass." Briella hugged her daughter tightly and patted her head. "Our visions are not absolute, but there is a high chance that they will come to pass," Briella replied. "Did you have a clear look on his face in your dream? What kind of face is he making?" His face looked calm. Cleo shuddered. It was as if he had already expected that something like that was going to happen. He had his subordinates behind him, and they were the only ones who were safe from the meteor strikes. "Mother, I'm scared." The young lady started to tear up because the scene she saw was truly horrifying. Although it was just a dream, as a seer, it felt very real to her. She could even smell the burning flesh on the battlefield, making her stomach churn. "Mother, have you gotten visions about him?" Cleo asked. "You should have, right? Is that the reason why you are calling him as your adopted son? If I tell you the truth, do you promise not to tell your father about it?" Briella asked back. "I won't tell Father. I promise." "But just like you, I also saw visions of him. But it is very different from the visions of destruction that you saw." "What did you see, Mother?" Cleo inquired out of curiosity. Briella paused for a bit as she carefully chose the words that she was going to say to her daughter. "As long as we don't harm him, Zion will not actively target our family," Briella replied. "Also, he has an important role to play, so we must not allow him to come to any harm while he is in our residence." "An important role to play?" "Yes. A very important one." "What is it, Mother?" Briella shook her head and pressed her finger over her lips. "I can't tell you. If I say it, it might not come to pass," Briella stated. "As I told you earlier, our visions are not absolute. They are not set in stone. I don't want to do anything that might jinx the vision I saw before Zion appeared in our home." "You were already expecting his arrival, Mother?" "I've been waiting for him to arrive for a long time now." Cleo inherited the bloodline of seers from her mother, Briella. Although the two of them had never seen the same vision, the visions they did see would usually come to pass. There was a time when Cleo tried to stop a vision from happening, only to find out that her attempt to stop it was actually the trigger that made her vision happen. Because of this, she felt that regardless of what she did, her vision would come to pass. Originally, she wanted to ask her father to imprison Zion so that what she saw would not become a reality. However, after thinking it through, she realized that imprisoning Zion might make him become their family's enemy, and he might be the one to instigate the meteor attack, killing countless Tigerkins in the process. In the end, she decided to just close her eyes and bury her head in her mother's embrace. If doing nothing would prevent that horrifying future from happening, then Cleo was willing to turn a blind eye towards the 7-year-old, who was currently sleeping soundly inside his room at this very moment. "You're getting better, Anwar," Dixon said as he extended his hand to help the tigerkin stand up. "You've improved a lot since I left to do the scouting mission that your father asked of me." A smile appeared on Anwar's face after hearing Dixon's praise. He had been training very hard every day for his goal, to be recognized by his stepfather, as well as the men under his command. Now that he was the only son in the family, it was only natural for him to inherit everything that the Evander family had. Of course, this might change if his stepmother, Briella, ever gave birth to another son, but Anwar wasn't worried. Briella could no longer bear any children after going through hard labor to bring Percival into the world. Rafiki, as well as the other shamans in the Sumatran kingdom, had confirmed that it was no longer possible for her to have another child. Also, he didn't hide his interest in his stepsister, Cleo, whom he wanted to marry in the future. All that was left for him to do was get his adopted parents' blessings. Once he achieved that, everything he worked hard for would finally be in his hands. "How is your relationship with Lady Briella?" Dixon asked. "Is she still not talking to you?" "Mother is still giving me the cold shoulder," Anwar replied in a sad tone. "I just don't know why she suddenly distanced herself from me." Dixon patted the young man's shoulder and gave him some words of encouragement. "Don't worry. I'm sure she is just worried about Percival. We have sent search parties everywhere, but we are still unable to find him. Your father had asked me to check the Barbarian lands for his whereabouts, but after infiltrating 2 cities, we still haven't found any traces of him. It is quite unfortunate that we were forced to withdraw due to the incident. I should have killed that drow instead of trying to capture her alive." Anwar patted Dixon's waist as if telling the older man that he didn't have to feel guilty that he was forced to return early. In fact, he was happy that things ended up that way. If the scouting party did manage to find Percival, things would get messy. In order to keep his current standing in the family, he needed to make sure that his little brother would never again appear in their lives. "Maybe I should have killed him so that I wouldn't have to continually walk on eggshells like this," Anwar thought. However, when that thought crossed his mind, he knew that he was unable to do it. He didn't hate Percival. In fact, he truly treated him as a little brother. But this all changed when the younger boy suddenly showed great potential that would surpass Anwar's talents after a few years. Anwar had thought that he would become the next head of the family, but Percival's sudden growth spurt worried him. The little brother he doted on suddenly became a threat in his eyes. And anything that would threaten his position must be eliminated to ensure that he would become the heir of the general's family. This incident also made him remember the original goal he had set for himself when he accepted General Stark's proposal for him to become his adopted son. So after steeling himself, he decided to lure his brother away from the safety of their residence, planning to have him killed by the barbarians during one of their raids. Since he didn't have the heart to kill Percival, he decided to use the hands of others to do it. Unfortunately for him, the barbarians' goal wasn't to kill people but to capture them to be sold as slaves to the slave master, who would pay a good price for them. After bidding goodbye to Dixon, Anwar returned to his room to take a bath. Just as he was about to take off his clothes, he noticed that there was a letter on top of the table, which made him frown. His room was locked, and the only way to enter it was through his window, which he had left open before he left to train. Left with no choice, he picked up the letter and read its contents. "Meet me tonight on the training grounds when everyone in the residence is asleep. If you don't come, I will tell your adopted parents about your little expedition with Percival near the border of the Sumatran kingdom." After reading the letter, Anwar's face immediately turned pale. He read the letter 3 times to ensure that he didn't misread anything. He even tried to analyze the handwriting to know the identity of the person who wrote it. But after confirming that the latter wasn't written by his adoptive parents, Cleo, Dixon, or Rafiki, he understood that this was written by someone outside of their family. Suddenly, the face of the 7-year-old appeared inside his head, but he dismissed this idea at once. For all of the days that Zion had been in the residence, he would often stay inside his room or be dragged around by his stepmother to tour the residence or the marketplace. But if it's not him, then who? Anwer thought for a while before deciding to burn the letter to ensure that no traces would be left behind. I guess that I have no choice but to meet that person later. No matter what, he would not allow anyone to disrupt the plans that he had worked hard to achieve. The tigerkin wasn't aware that outside of his window, perched on top of a tree branch, a Poco was paying close attention to what was happening inside the room. After seeing Anwer burn the letter, a disdainful expression briefly crossed the dumb-looking bird's face before it flapped its wings to fly away. Inside 13th's room, the sound of chirping reached 13th's ears, making him smile. Now, the real fun starts, 13 thought as he rested his head over the backs of his intertwined hands. No matter where you run, no matter where you hide, I will make sure that you dance on the palm of my hands, my future villain. Although he felt a little sorry for Anwer, the 7-year-old still decided to push through with his plan, which would drive his target into a corner. He couldn't care less about the family drama that was happening in the Evander residence. However, the upcoming war didn't give 13 a lot of time to stay in the Sumatran kingdom. He knew that the moment the war began, he would no longer be able to leave safely. This was why he decided to act after laying down his trap for Anwer, whom he would drag to reunite with his little brother, Percival. I'm such a good person, 13 smiled. Taiga seems lonely, so having his brother around will certainly make him happy. The young boy couldn't help but chuckle evilly because he could already see the hero's reaction after being able to see the brother who betrayed him. But 13 didn't care. In order to raise both the hero and the villain, he needed the two of them on the same team, allowing him to keep them both within arm's reach. This method would ensure that the two of them would work hard for his sake until he finished all of the trials that the system god had shackled him with. Under the cover of the night, Anwer walked silently across the hallways of their residence. He was currently headed to the training grounds to meet with the person who had sent him the letter. It was past midnight, and he knew that everyone in the residence was deeply asleep at this time. With the exception of a few guards guarding the gate and the outside perimeter of their residence, there would be no one else who would be awake during this time of the night. When he arrived at his destination, he cautiously looked at his surroundings in search of the person who had asked him to come. I'm here, Anwer. The tigerkin immediately looked in the direction where he heard the voice and saw a cloaked figure standing on a balcony overlooking the training grounds. You're the one who called me here, Anwer said in a cold tone. Yes, the cloaked figure replied. I'm the one who called you here. The tigerkin subconsciously looked around his surroundings in order to make sure that no one was around. A moment later, the claws on his hands extended, ready to tear the little boy, who could potentially ruin everything he had worked hard for, to shreds. Although he was wearing a cloak, it was very obvious to the tigerkin who the speaker was. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Anwer, 13 replied. The moment you move from that spot, I'll scream. Let's see what's faster, you succeeding in killing me, or a peak champion catching you in the act. Anwer weighed his options after hearing the boy's reply. Although he was confident that he could kill the boy before his father or the guards of the residence reacted, there was still a high possibility that they would arrive at the scene before he could erase all evidence of his crime. What do you want? Anwer asked. Me. 13 chuckled. I want you to become my slave. Me? Your slave? Are you delusional? Who would want to become your slave? Anwer, believe me when I say that after everything is over, you will beg me to make you my slave. The tigerkin snorted after hearing the boy's reply. He had already thought carefully about what he would do once he found out the identity of the person who was trying to make his life difficult. But after seeing that the one who was behind the message was actually the human boy, Anwer decided to change his approach and eliminate the threat as soon as possible. But for that to happen, he needed to make the boy lower his guard first. Zion, I came here because you asked me to come, Anwer stated. But I don't understand why you are doing this. Do you know how much our family has suffered ever since Percival disappeared? If you know where my brother is, it would be best if you cooperate with me so that he can return to our family. Anwer didn't know if Zion really knew the truth or was just making things up. Almost everyone in the city already knew that Percival had mysteriously disappeared one day, and no one had seen him since then. Since the human boy had been in the residence for a few days, It would not be impossible for him to overhear this information from the people inside the residence. In the end, Anwar believed that the boy was only trying to mess with him so that he could help him escape their residence and return to the barbarian lands where he belonged. Cooperate with you to return Percival back to his family? 13 said in disdain. What you mean is that you plan to finally eliminate him to ensure that you will not have any possible trouble in the future, right? Zion, Percival is my brother, Anwar replied as he took a step forward. I would never do anything to hurt him. But you already did, 13 snorted. You betrayed him and allowed him to be captured by barbarians. Zion, it's not good to slander an innocent person. If you are going to say such things, you need to have solid proof, or else, you will be imprisoned for besmirching my honor. Anwar took another step, shortening the gap between him and the boy. The Tigerkin was calculating how many steps it would take for him to go for the killing blow, without giving the boy a chance to call for help. According to his estimate, he would need at least 5 more steps before he reached the minimum distance for his special ability to reach the boy and take his life. One more step and I'll scream, Zion threatened. That way, your adoptive family will have the chance to join our discussion about your betrayal. Anwar, who was about to take another step, momentarily paused and crossed his arms over his chest. Like I said earlier, you don't have any proof. Anwar smiled. If you want to pin the crime of my brother's disappearance on me, you need to do better, boy. Proof. 13 chuckled. The fact that you are asking for proof means that you are already guilty, Anwar. An innocent person would not think to ask for proof of his wrongdoings because they know that they are innocent. You should remember this lesson for future reference. Never ask for proof because it will only make you look guilty. Also, the proof you are looking for? I have it as well. Anwar's body tensed when he heard that the human boy had proof of his wrongdoings. Of course, he still believed that Zion was just making things up in order to fish for information from him, which would tie him to his brother's disappearance. Well then, I would like to hear this proof you are speaking of. Anwar prepared himself to charge in the boy's direction, just in case he truly had solid proof of his wrongdoing. The training grounds were at the very back of their residence. Even if Zion managed to scream, he was confident that after killing the boy, he could jump over the wall of the training grounds and run toward the forest with the boy's body fast enough. There, he would find a wild animal to devour the boy, erasing all evidence. He could just say that he was in the vicinity when he heard the scream and went to investigate what had happened. This alibi was perfect, and the Tigerkin had already prepared himself to lunge as soon as he confirmed that Zion truly had evidence that would tie him to his brother's disappearance. Anwar, do you know the reason why your mother is giving you the cold shoulder? 13 asked. Why? Anwar asked back as his razor-sharp fingernails extended. Although he was truly curious why his stepmother was giving him the cold shoulder as of late, he still prioritized in killing the boy in front of him after he heard his answer. It's because she is a seer, 13 replied in contempt. Do you really believe that she hasn't seen what you have done to her son? Anwar, are you really that stupid, or do you believe that you can get away with the crime of targeting a general's family? Did your goal of taking revenge for your father cloud your judgment? What a stupid boy. You should have just lived your life as a good stepson for a few years. It wouldn't have been too late to have your revenge after you married Cleo. But Percival's potential scared you, didn't it? You thought that his parents would love him more than you, am I right? Right after 13 finished talking, Anwar disappeared from where he stood and reappeared 2 meters away from him. A glint of madness could be seen in the Tigerkin's eyes as he slashed his claws forward, creating a crimson blade that removed the boy's head from his body. You talk too much, Anwar said coldly as he looked at the severed head on the ground that was still covered by a cloak. What Zion had said unnerved him. If Briella had truly seen what he had done, then that would explain why she was giving him the cold shoulder. But after thinking about this possibility, several questions popped up inside his head. If his stepmother truly saw what had happened, then why hadn't she told her husband about it? If what Anwar did really came to light, then he shouldn't be walking freely inside the Evander residence and should instead be locked up inside a prison. Since none of these things happened, he believed that Zion was just bluffing him. You should have kept your mouth shut. Anwer sneered as he took off the cloak that was covering the boy's severed head. You would have been able to live longer if you did. Suddenly, the sneer on the tigerkin's face faded after seeing that the head under the cloak wasn't a human's head, but a dummy head made up of clay. It was at that moment when a mischievous voice reached his ears. Do you really think someone like you can kill me? Anwer slowly turned around to look in the direction where the voice was coming from. Standing at the entrance of the training ground was none other than Zion. However, he wasn't alone. Dixon, Armand, Alina, and Rafiki were standing behind the 7-year-old, who had his arms crossed over his chest and had a smug smile plastered on his face. But this wasn't the reason why Anwer's face suddenly lost all its colors. Standing on the other balcony was none other than his stepfather, General Stark, and his stepmother, Briella, who was looking at him with a sad expression on her face. "No, this is not what you think, father, mother," Anwer stuttered. "That human boy is framing me. I didn't do anything. I am innocent. This is all part of his plan. I didn't do anything wrong. Stand down, Anwer, and surrender yourself for questioning," General Stark said with a disappointed look on his face. "I will listen to everything that you have to say, so calm down and have a proper talk with me." Anwer hatefully glared in the direction where Zion was, only to find the human boy mouthing the words, "checkmate," to his face. Knowing that the truth would come to light once he was forced to drink a truth serum made by Rafiki, Anwer did the only thing he could do. He fled. The tigerkin jumped over the wall and ran toward the depths of the forest as fast as he could. But it was all for naught. Half a minute after he made his escape, he saw General Stark blocking his path. With one quick chop of his right hand, the general knocked Anwer unconscious, making his adoptive son fall to the ground, unable to get up again. General Stark looked at the young man, whom he had raised as his own son, with a bitter look on his face. He never thought that the boy had planned to take revenge on his family after Anwer's father had died on one of the missions that he had assigned for the greater good of the Sumatran kingdom. Several hours before 13 and Anwer met at the training grounds of the Evander residence. "Boy, I have tolerated your existence here in my residence," General Stark said coldly. "But if you are trying to sow discord in my family, I don't mind feeding you to the wolves. You come here all of a sudden, disturbing me while I am busy with work, just to say that Anwer was the cause of Percival's disappearance. Do you seriously expect me to believe you?" "Not really," 13 replied. "But I have a way to make you believe me. And that is Rafiki's truth serum." The general narrowed his eyes after hearing the boy's words. The truth serum was something they used to interrogate the barbarians they had captured to make them answer all the questions they had. This had been a tried and proven method, so when the human boy proposed that he drink the potion to prove his credibility, the general couldn't help but become suspicious of him. Seeing his reaction, a faint smile appeared on the younger boy's face. "Looking at your reaction, I don't know if you love Anwer more than you love your real son." 13 narrowed his eyes. Maybe this is the reason why Anwer thought he could get away with his crime. You may be decisive when it comes to fighting on the battlefield, so how come when it comes to the issues with your family, you would rather turn a blind eye than accept the truth? Are you perhaps still feeling guilty because Anwer's father died because of your orders? After hearing all the information he needed from Visego and confirming it with Dixon, Armand, and Rafiki, the 7-year-old understood that, even now, General Stark was still feeling guilty toward his adoptive son. Because of this, he had showered Anwer with all the love he could and allowed the child to do anything he wanted. "Boy, you are going too far." "But I am not wrong, am I? Even when the facts are dancing in front of you, you choose to look the other way and pretend that you're not seeing anything. Do you know? Even now, Percival is suffering. His new master is truly wicked and tortures him every day. I know about it because I was always there whenever his master did unspeakable things to him." 13 was doing his best not to laugh because what he was saying was the truth. Percival's master was truly wicked and tortured the tigerkin every day. He was also there whenever it happened because that so-called wicked master, who loved to make the general's son suffer, was him. Just as he expected, the general's expression became twisted after hearing that Percival was being tortured every day. How could he not feel anything, knowing that his biological son was somewhere out there suffering? Dixon, who was also inside the room, couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. He had watched Percival grow up, and the boy even treated him like an uncle. This was why he had chosen to lead the scouting party to the Barbarian lands, hoping to find any signs of him. But, due to the incident with Zion, they were forced to return empty-handed to the Sumatran kingdom before they were captured by their enemies. Dixon, call Rafiki and tell him to bring his truth serum, General Stark ordered. Yes, General. Dixon bowed respectfully before leaving the room. Once his right-hand man had left the room, General Stark glared at the boy, who was casually sitting on the chair in front of him. I promise that if you are making things up, I will make sure that you regret being born, General Stark threatened. And what if I'm not making things up? 13 arched an eyebrow. What do I get in return for sharing this information with you? General Stark pondered a bit before giving his reply. I will give you your freedom back. If you want to return to the Barbarian lands, I will let you do it. If you want to stay here, you can do that as well, and you will no longer be restricted to remaining inside my home. 13 shook his head because this wasn't the reward that he wanted. There were still a few things that seemed fishy about this war, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. As a system, he was aware that wars could break out for the silliest of reasons. But the war between the Tigerkins and the Barbarians was different. He could feel that there was a mastermind pulling the strings from the shadows, manipulating both sides for a confrontation. Simply put, 13 couldn't shake the feeling that a third party was involved. This was due to his experience after accompanying his hosts for thousands of years. However, since he still didn't have any leads, he decided to take one step at a time and focus on the things that were in front of him. What I want is Anwar, 13 replied. Give him to me. What are you going to do with him? General Stark asked. I will reform him, 13 answered. Since he had committed a severe crime, I don't think your family still wants him around. But you must still feel guilty about what happened to his father and can't bring yourself to get him killed either. Still, your guilt doesn't lower the severity of his crime. You can't just brush it off and expect Percival to forgive him. Your wife and daughter will also not forgive him. This leaves you with only 3 choices. The first one is execution. The second one is imprisonment. Last but not the least is exile. Among these 3 choices, you will choose to get him exiled, won't you? Because that is the only way that you will feel less guilty about his punishment. General Stark eyed the human boy because he just realized that Zion was leading him by the nose. During their entire discussion, it was the boy who was in full control of their conversation, making him, a general, feel as if he wasn't dealing with a child but a great strategist whose experience was greater than his. His instincts were screaming at him that this boy was dangerous and should not be allowed to live. But before he could nurture this thought, the door of the room opened. You called for me, General? Rafiki asked as he walked inside the room, accompanied by Dixon. When the shaman's gaze landed on the boy, who was sitting in front of the general, a thought came to his mind. Don't tell me that the truth serum is meant for Zion? Rafiki thought. Does the general think of him as a spy? The shaman had grown fond of the boy because he was a very intelligent child who had limitless potential. Just a few hours ago, the 7-year-old was inside the infirmary, borrowing his tools to grind down some poisonous flowers that he had picked from Briella's garden. He had originally planned to raise Zion as his apprentice because he believed that such a talent should not go to waste. But after sensing the tense atmosphere inside the room, he had a feeling that something very important was about to happen, and he wanted to be there to witness it firsthand. Rafiki, make Zion drink the truth serum, General Stark ordered. I have a few questions that I want him to answer. As you wish, General, Rafiki replied. The shaman then took out a vial with a green liquid inside of it. This was the truth serum he had developed, and it contained powerful hallucinogens that could alter a person's character and thoughts, making their mental states more vulnerable and allowing Rafiki and the general to exploit them. 13 didn't offer any resistance and drank the truth serum while laughing inside his heart. He wanted to know just how potent Rafiki's truth serum was. If it passed his standards, he would ask the shaman for the recipe so that he could brew it himself and use it for his future plans. After drinking the potion, 13 immediately felt lightheaded, and his thoughts seemed to scatter, making him unable to think properly. However, instead of being alarmed, the boy felt amused because Rafiki's truth serum was better than he thought. Although he could make something better, he didn't have the necessary ingredients to concoct one. For the time being, he allowed the truth serum to take full effect on him in order to prevent the general and Rafiki from becoming suspicious of him. As a system, his mind was his strongest weapon. A mere truth serum was nothing to him. Seeing the blank look on the boy's face, Rafiki glanced at the general and nodded his head. "What is your name?" General Stark asked. "Zion," 13 replied. "Zion Leventis. How old are you?" 7.5 years old. The general continued to ask the boy several questions, testing if the truth potion was working properly. After asking over a dozen questions and finding that the boy had spoken nothing but the truth, he began to ask him the questions that were of utmost importance to him. "Where is my son, Percival, right now?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" General Stark frowned. "What do you mean you don't know?" "I got separated from him when I went with Lady Adira to lure the golden-eyed hyenas to follow us to let him and the rest of the slaves escape," 13 replied. Dixon, who had seen 13 with the drow, nodded his head in confirmation. "What barbarian city were you and my son being held in?" General Stark inquired. "I don't know," 13 answered. "We were not allowed to leave the warehouse and wander around the city." "What kind of master do you guys have?" "A very wicked and evil master. He doesn't hesitate to torture Percival on a daily basis." The frown on General Stark's face deepened after hearing that his son was being tortured every day. "What kind of torture is my son undergoing every day?" the general asked, his tone as cold as ice. "Twice a week, he is sent to the arena so that he can earn money for our master," 13 answered. "If he wins, he is allowed to eat. And if he loses, he will be starved for an entire day even if he is seriously injured from his duels. On the days that he isn't in the arena, he is forced to fight other tigerkins in the warehouse. Since he doesn't want to hurt his comrades, he winds up enduring their attacks until he gets beaten black and blue. Our master also enjoys making Percival get down on his knees to clean the feet of ogres and trolls with his tongue. He seems to enjoy Percival's stubborn face filled with humiliation every time he licked the feet of all the monster slaves one by one." A loud crack reverberated inside the room as General Stark smashed his table with his right fist, breaking it completely. "Bastard! I'll kill him!" General Stark growled in anger. "I'll kill him!" Even Dixon was doing his best to control himself from breaking things inside the room because what the boy told them was simply too much for a warrior like him to bear. Tigerkins were a prideful race, and they would rather die than be humiliated by their enemies. It took a while for General Stark to regain his composure. It was hard for him to accept the hardships that Percival was facing on a daily basis. When he felt that he now regained control of his emotions, he continued his interrogation, but his words were now calmer than before. "What is your relationship with my son, Percival?" General Stark asked. "I don't know if Percival considers me as a friend or not," 13 replied. "But I often bring him scraps of bread and food whenever he has nothing to eat. We often talk with each other before we go to sleep. That is how I came to know about his family. He hates Anwer very much, and he often cries and talks in his sleep calling him a traitor and all sorts of other names. There are also times when he says that he misses his mother and wishes that he had never left home with Anwer to go to the villages on the border." 13 made sure to paint himself as Percival's one and only friend who helped him during his hardest moments. The boy also didn't hesitate to badmouth their wicked master and curse him for making all of them suffer on a daily basis. If there was an award for the best child actor, 13 would have gotten it then and there, with Visago getting the award for best supporting actor. After hearing the other unspeakable hardships that the slaves had undergone under their master's order, General Stark, Dixon, and Rafiki were becoming more emotional and looked at the 7-year-old, who had suffered alongside Percival, with pitiful gazes. When the interrogation was over, Rafiki made Zion drink the cure for the truth serum, allowing him to regain his senses. What they didn't know was that 13 had been in full control of his thoughts throughout the entire interrogation, deceiving the adults into feeling more sympathetic toward him. "General, please give me permission to capture Anwer and have him detained," Dixon said, with fury blazing in his eyes. His fury was blazing after coming to learn that the person he had trained to become a warrior was actually a white-eyed wolf who wouldn't hesitate to betray his general because he wanted revenge. Don't do that. 13, who looked weak and pitiful in their eyes, struggled to voice out his thoughts. I have a better plan, 13 answered. And if it works, not only will we be able to save Percival, we will also be able to reform Anwer as well. I believe he deserves a second chance. He only acted like this because he blames the general's family for his father dying on his mission. After Dixon heard the boy's words, he reeled in his anger and looked at the general, who would decide on their next course of action. Tell me what you have in mind, General Stark. If this will ensure that Percival will be rescued, then I wouldn't mind cooperating with you. 13 nodded and began to tell them what he intended to do. After listening to the 7-year-old's plan, the adults couldn't help but look at him in disbelief. They never thought that someone as young as Zion would be able to make such a detailed plan that would not only allow Percival to be rescued but also allow Anwer to redeem himself. 13 looked calm on the surface, but deep inside, he was smiling evilly. If his plan really worked, then not only would he acquire a hero and a villain, but he would also get the general's support from the shadows, allowing him to investigate the real reason behind the upcoming war. The 7-year-old strongly believed that this war was just a smokescreen for something bigger. As to what that thing was, he wanted to put a stop to it before a full-blown battle between the Barbarians and the Tigerkins took place, dyeing the Valbara archipelago with the color of their blood. Anwer, who was currently imprisoned in the private jail of the general's residence, couldn't help but sigh sadly in his heart. His life had many ups and downs, especially after his father had died. However, General Stark adopted him as his own son, perhaps out of guilt and duty to his right-hand man, who was also Anwer's father. When he arrived in the general's residence, he was showered with love and affection by their entire family. He grew up without a mother, and Briella had given him the love that he had never experienced before. Also, Percival looked up to him as an older brother, and truth be told, he also enjoyed having a snarky little brother. Then there was Cleo. Even before he became the adopted son of the general, he always had feelings for the young lady, who had just turned 16 this year. He didn't know when it all started, but he truly believed that his life was perfect, even forgetting his anger and desire for revenge for his father's death. But all of that changed after Percival started to awaken his potential. He felt threatened that the perfect life he had would crumble. He was afraid that his adoptive parents would push him to the side, as they focused all their love and attention to Percival, whom many believed had the potential to become someone truly great. After being riddled with doubt and anxiety, the thoughts of revenge that he had locked deep inside his heart rose to the surface. But this was no longer directed at the Evander family as a whole. He directed it towards Percival, who now threatened the perfect life he currently had. Anwer knew that if he had to start things over, he wouldn't have changed anything. The only thing he would do differently was to kill the source of his current dilemma, and it was none other than the 7-year-old, who had flipped his life upside down in less than a week. The only silver lining was that the general made sure that no one else knew about what had happened a few hours ago. All the maids were asked to return home for the night, and the guards were stationed far away from the training grounds, preventing them from coming to the scene. Simply put, aside from the Evander family, Rafiki, Dixon and his team, no one else knew what had transpired that night. No one knew that Anwer had betrayed his own family. Good morning, Anwer, have you eaten yet? Hearing that familiar voice, Anwer raised his head and growled hatefully. You! The Tigerkin glared at the human boy, who was the cause of his suffering. Oh, they still haven't fed you? My goodness! 13 smiled as he sat on the chair that his escort, Alina, had carried all the way to Anwer's jail cell. Don't worry. I just finished eating breakfast, and I ate enough for both of us. I'm such a good person, right? Alina, who was standing beside 13, gave Anwer a side. Long glance before leaving. The boy wanted to talk to the prisoner in private, so Alina left as she was ordered. Anwer had already told General Stark, as well as Rafiki, about everything that had happened. Since his mind was hazy at that time, he wasn't able to see the grief and disappointment in the general's face during the entirety of the interrogation. He only came to his senses when he was already locked up in jail, and left alone in the darkness. Under the light of the torchlight, 13's face looked like an innocent, yet malicious devil, who was eyeing him as if he was some kind of delicacy that he wanted to take a bite of. Also, his green eyes seemed to glow in the dark like that of a wild animal who was about to eat him whole, not even leaving the bones behind. Anwer, who was a rank 3 tigerkin, couldn't help but shudder under the gaze of those green eyes, which seemed to have everything under their control. Anwer, I can help you escape this place, you know? 13 said in a voice that was rich with temptation. You can escape this place and start all over again. And what's the catch? Anwer sneered. To become your slave? No, thank you. I'd rather die. Well, you could do that, yes. 13 nodded. But I just think it's a waste, you know? Especially if you can redeem yourself as the hero of the entire tigerkin race. Do you really think that I'm a gullible child who would believe anything that you say? Anwer scoffed. I have already admitted my crimes. Whether the general executes me or imprisons me for life, there is nothing else that I can do. 13 chuckled after hearing Anwer's defeated voice. Oh, but there is something that you can do, 13 stated. And you always have a choice to make. I offer you a chance to escape this place and redeem yourself. And yet, you chose to die a dog's death, so don't delude yourself that there is nothing else you can do. Anwer glared at the human boy, who was resting his head on the palm of his hand and acting like he was sitting on a throne. But he had to admit that for a brief moment he really thought that he was facing a prince, and not a boy who was more than a dozen years younger than him. Let's say that I escape this place. Anwer clenched his fists. Where should I go? Where else? That barbarian lands, of course, 13 answered casually. A place where you can start all over again. Also, you can even reunite with your little brother as a bonus. Anwer's body stiffened when he finally realized what the boy was talking about. Seeing his reaction, the 7-year-old smirked. Did you forget my background story? 13 asked. Before I was captured, I was in the same party as your brother, Percival. Why are you acting so surprised now? You mean to say that you plan to turn me over to your master and become a slave like my brother? Anwer frowned. Is that how you plan to make me redeem myself? You're only half right, 13 replied. Anwer, while everyone thinks that Percival is bound for greatness, I think that you are bound for greatness as well. In fact, I am certain that you will even surpass your brother. Anwer laughed because Zion's words were like words of pity towards a loser. The ironic part was that the human boy laughed alongside him. Soon, the laughter of 2 third-rate villains echoed inside the dark prison, making Alina, who was guarding the door outside, shudder when the diabolical laughters reached her ears.